Yes, Kevin, I'm here. Do you hear me? Kevin, do you hear me? Or what? No, it's not. But I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it. Yeah, I'm not sure because I could hear you and see the presentation, but I just don't hear. I guess you don't hear me.
Got it.
Could all the legislators please take their seats that's on the Budget Review Committee?
No. It won't go on until I shut this one off. So we may just. Legislator Witten, who's trying to confuse us, being in front of Legislator Ferretti, Nicolello, Legislator Delia DeRiggi Witten. You're confusing us because you're in front of. That's okay. We got it.
Delia. Oh.
Howard's in front of Denise's.
Yeah. Let's go.
He's fixing the name tag.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Trying to confuse an old lady here.
Okay, if everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance as our presiding officer, Rich Nicolello, leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice.
All right, Mr. Pulitzer, if you would please do the roll call for the Budget Review Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Budget Review Committee roll call. Legislator Arnold Drucker. Ranking Member Kavan Abrahams.
I will be substituting for him.
Thank you, ma'am. That is Delia DeRiggi Witten. Legislator Howard Copel. Vice Chairman Richard Nicolello. Chairman John Ferretti. We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pulitzer. We're going to start off today with public comment. We have one speaker, Mr. Kevin McKenna. Is Mr. McKenna here?
Yeah, Kevin McKenna, Edna Drive, Syosset, New York. I would have thought that public session at a budget meeting would be after you talk about the budget so that we could hear what it is that is taking place so that then we can comment on it. Could we do it that way, or?
No, sir, we're having public comment to start the session. So
what's the
please,
comment
whatever,
about? What's the
you
public
tell
comment
me, sir.
about?
Whatever you'd like to speak about with regard to the budget.
Well, I haven't heard about the budget to speak about. You're kind of doing things backwards, with all due respect. I mean, I'm sure that if you were on this side of the fence, you would probably agree with me. We are being broadcast live to all Nassau County residents right now. Also, to my surprise, I checked last week to see when the next Nassau County Ledge meeting was, and this budget meeting was not announced on the Nassau County website last week. Today I happened to notice it. It popped up there all of a sudden, and it's a shame that Nassau County residents are not given notice of such an important budget meeting by Nassau County. It's also a shame that the Nassau County legislators, who continually put up posts on their Facebook pages self-promoting themselves at events, especially Legislator Drucker, who continually self-promotes himself at events. I don't understand why the legislators would not post on their Facebook page and alert their constituents to such an important event, like a budget meeting. This is a really, really important meeting that 99.999 of the Nassau County residents do not know about. Do you agree, Ms. Phillips? Do you agree that most residents don't know about this?
Mr. McKenna, your comments are to this body right here, not to the
Okay.
controller. So please direct your comments to the members of the
good.
legislature. Thank you.
Is the Nassau County Board of Elections under the budget of the budget that you're here to talk about?
Yes, it's part of the 2022 Nassau
Okay,
County.
I sent in an email to all Nassau County legislators as well as the Nassau County executive suggesting and recommending an audit of the Nassau County Board of Elections, because I have proof, documented proof, that there are individuals that have low-show jobs in the Nassau County Board of Elections, and you owe it to the taxpayers to perform an audit of the Board of Elections, because there are people that are working inside the Board of Elections that are not working for the operations of the Board of Elections. They're working for the party leaders. And if you guys are concerned about the budget, you could really, really save the taxpayers money by trimming down that Board of Elections.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. McKenna.
How much time is allocated to public comment for this meeting, since I'm only the one speaker?
Mr. McKenna, 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
But how much time is allocated to the meeting for public comment?
Sir, we would see how many speakers are here and then allocate time.
You know what's
appropriately.
unbelievable?
Thank you, sir.
You know
Thank
what's
you.
unbelievable?
We're going to move to the controller now.
What's
Thank
unbelievable
you.
is that you are showing the public right now that you do not want to hear from us. You are showing the public that you have no interest in hearing from the public. You should all resign, every one of you.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much.
Okay, we're going to move to the controller, Ms. Elaine Phillips. I know you have a presentation. And by the way, thank you, everyone, for being here today. And thank you to the controller's office. I know Mr. Persick is here as well. Thank you. So, controller, take it away.
I think it's on. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to the entire legislature that is not here today, but specifically the Budget Review Committee. I'd like to thank you, Chairman, Legislator Ferretti, the Vice Chairman, Presiding Officer Nicolello, Legislator Coppell, Legislator Drucker, Legislator DeRiggi Whitten, who is my county legislator, and Legislator John Frey for having us here today. I'd also like to give Kevin and Frank and Chris and the whole team a shout out, and Mr. Pulitzer up there for making the technology side of this so easy. One doesn't present our findings without the people that really do the hard work. So I'd like to take a minute and thank my staff. First and foremost, my Deputy Controller, Betsy Hill, who leads our accounting division, and the Director of Accounting, Lisa Sikoris. And it's Lisa and her team, really your team, that made our mid-year report, made all the published reports for year-end of 2021 happen. So without them, today would not happen. I'm also blessed to have the whole front row here. I have my Director of Communications, Wendy Goldstein. I have my summer intern, Kevin Judge, who were really instrumental in getting this report together here today. I have my Deputy Controller in charge of overseeing audit, Jeff Schoen, Deputy Controller Beaumont Jefferson, who's in charge of claims, benefits, and payroll here. We have my Chief Counsel, Charlie Casolaro, Melissa Marciano, and Nikki Bambois. So thank you, you guys. They have my back. So we're going to take a few minutes of your time today and go through a summary of our mid-year report on for 2022. So we're going to take a step back for a second, and if we could go to our first slide and just give you a quick overview of the results of 2021. As mentioned, on June 30th, we published our annual comprehensive financial report. These are the audited finances for Nassau County according to GAAP under GASB Statement 54. I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail because you have an expert here in the audience, and that's Andy Persich. So we felt it was a better use of your time to let Andy really make the highlights there. And particularly, I wasn't in the administration at the time. I think, though, the key point that I'd like to highlight is in that highlighted bar that in 2021, Nassau County ended with a surplus of $479.5 million. So I want to say to you, congratulations. Good job. Really good job. I also like you to look back because I think it's important that you also ended 2020 with a surplus of $15.9 million and 2019 of $150.8 million. We are talking about 3 consecutive years, 3 interesting consecutive years when it comes to both national and global events, and you ended a surplus. So let me say once again, congratulations. Let's go on to the 2022 budget. So for the next page, oh, and let me tell you, I apologize, you have a folder in front of you. On the left side is the presentation. On the right side is the mid-year report. You probably are not going to need the mid-year report for today, but I wanted you to have it both in a hard copy. We sent it to you electronically, but you can follow through on the presentation on the left side. So go to page 3 in the presentation, and please, I'm going to apologize. The numbers are small, but let me assure you that we are going to go through the highlights or the drivers of what we believe that the actual budget will come in for in 2022 versus what the adopted budget. And the bottom line is, on the very bottom right, is we believe that Nassau County will continue a surplus. And based on our analysis, it will be $38.2 million. So please, yeah, we're going to share this. So you want to talk about the 3? So let us talk about a little bit of the difference between the way we report versus other reporting.
Right. So, so this schedule on this page that has all the risks and opportunities against the 22 adopted budget is it mimics the GAAP reporting. So for our financial statements, we report our general fund in accordance with Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement number 54, which was issued in 2011. And in that, we have to consolidate certain funds that from a budgetary perspective and from a reporting and management perspective are reported separately. So the general fund that's reported in here consists of approximately 10 separate funds. And we also look at, obviously, the police district fund, which is one of the 5 major funds that's also from a management perspective. And we also look at the sewer fund as well as an operating fund of the county. So our basis here mimics what we report in our financial statements.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. If there are any questions concerning that, please either bring them up now or save them for later. But I think it's safe to say it's a more comprehensive way of looking at the county. And I am going to put a plug in right now because you gave me a mic. This is why it is so critical that Nassau County gets a new financial system. The one we have is not GAAP, doesn't report on a GAAP basis. And the fact is GAAP is the way to report. It's the way we can evaluate ourselves versus other counties throughout New York State. So it is crucial that we make the step, and thanks to you, we have funding to get that going. So we're going to ask for a little more funding eventually, too. I'm going to ask you to turn to page 4, and we were joined by legislator Denise Ford. Thank you for coming. So Legislator Ford, open up your packet. On the left side is the presentation, and we're just starting with page 4. So what page 4 does is really, because you can't read all those tiny numbers, yes, we have tons of packets. Got it? So what page 4 does, it really just highlights the positive opportunities that are driving our projections, and also goes into what could be some of the drivers on the risk side. And so I am going to go through each and every one of them, but so I'm going to start out with sales tax. Sales tax, we are forecasting that sales tax will come in $85.8 million higher than what was budgeted. So trust me for a second, and let's turn the page to page 5. How did we get there? Well, first, we look at historicals, right? So what this chart gives you, it gives you your adopted budgets for sales tax revenues from 2012 to 2022. And those are the orange bars. On top of that, we give you the blue line, and it shows you what the actuals were. So one of the comments that I'm sure that you deal with, and I know we deal with, is the comment that we hear that sales tax revenue can be very unreliable. I think what this chart demonstrates, or one of the things that this chart demonstrates, is in fact, Nassau County's sales tax revenue has been pretty reliable, dating all the way back to 2012. And I'm going to let Betsy tell a little story about that in a second. But I think what's important here is the reliability that we look at that and saying, even back in 2012, we had sales tax revenue that was well over $1 billion. We also know what happened in 2019 is the New York State Legislature, that Nassau County was able to start receiving sales tax from internet sales. Now, how did that impact? It's hard to tell because of COVID. But you have a pretty consistent revenue source here. And I'm going to let Deputy Controller Hill just comment on 2012-13 because it's relevant.
Yeah, I was in the bond industry for 40 years, and I shouldn't have admitted that, but I remember being concerned about Nassau County when the sales tax dropped from 2013 to 2014, and I lived here about that time. But then
Ms. Hill, can you just move the mic a little closer just so I
Okay.
can hear you at home?
Okay. I was concerned about the drop in sales tax from 2013 to 2014, never looking back and realizing until now, if you drove the line directly from 2012 to 2014, pretty straight, what really happened was there was an increase in sales tax only in 2013, and that was likely due to much of the things that had to be purchased after Sandy, housing, construction work, cars, major appliances, house goods. So that really explains why there was not really a drop so much as a temporary increase in sales tax.
Thank you. So we looked at historicals. What's happened with sales tax revenues? Then we looked at today's economy. So if you turn to page 6, it's just a simple, brief snapshot of what's going on today. We know GDP has been negative for 2 quarters in 2022. Is it a recession? Is it not? We also know unemployment is at historical lows. So they're really countering each other, right? Really countering each other. Then we know, in going down to the last chart, inflation is still at historical high levels. But then I'm going to send you over to the personal income, retail sales, and consumer spending. So what drives sales tax revenue? It's you and I. It's us. Are we spending money? And all I can say is, at least as of this data, the consumer continues to spend. You know, I've read things in the Wall Street Journal that says MasterCard is forecasting back-to-school sales, spending up 7.5% from July to September over the 2021 numbers. I'm also hearing that maybe we're not buying the high-end Bic pens for our children. We might be buying the generic pens for our children, but we are still buying. So despite the negative GDP numbers, positive unemployment numbers, we get an unemployment number again tomorrow, the fact is, up to this point, the consumer continues to spend. And I'm going to give you some actual numbers on Nassau County here also. So let's go to the next page. So we looked at historicals. We looked at the economy. And then we looked at actuals and said, what has actually happened to date in 2022 versus 2021? So I'm going to take you up into the first chart. I'm going to take you into the box of 2022, and then we can go into the white lines. I mean, you can see February through April, May through July, but let's just go to the total. So total in 2022 through April, we have received $673.4 million worth of tax revenue versus, keep going over to the right, in 2021, at this same time, we had received $617.8 million. That difference is a 9% increase. By chance, or, good news is, well, let's go down, okay? So then we said, okay, how does it all trend also? We see actuals, and I'm going to point you to the yellow line. That's 2022. And then I'm going to point you to 2021, which is the year where we have received the highest level of sales tax revenue. And the fact is, you see that 9% difference. But we also see a pretty steep decline in month 7. But if you look at all those other colors, the fact is it all goes down. So it really is a cyclical decline that happens probably after Mother's Day. We believe the spike is Mother's Day, okay? Then you get that lull in June, July. Then you start seeing a spike back up, maybe back to school, and then you see your holiday sales at the end. So I think, there was a lot of talk about the sky is falling because those numbers were beginning to drop. They dropped in July. Well, the answer is they've dropped every year, at least going back to 2018 in July also. We also received a check today for predominantly June and July. You get a little bit of June, some of the tail end stuff, but all of July. And that check is an increase of over 2021 of 11%. So we're still staying above 2021 numbers. And the reason I emphasize that is I'm going to take you to the next page, page 8. It gets into what we're forecasting, that $85.8 million that I mentioned a few slides ago, and why we got there. So 2021 actual total sales tax revenue was $1.409 billion. You budgeted $1.375 billion. To date, as of June, we had $670 million. We are forecasting $1.46 billion. The variance is $85.8 million. That's 6.2% over budget and a 3.7% over actuals in 2021. But I wouldn't be a good analyst if I didn't tell you what if? What if we're wrong? We don't have a crystal ball. We don't profess to have a crystal ball. So that's why the next chart is so important for you, for OMB, for the county administration, right? So let me walk you through this chart. This chart, as it's titled, is possible sales tax scenarios. So the top line are the scenarios, which would be actuals that we have, with the exception of the check that we received today, and minus 10% over 2021 actuals, down 10%, actuals minus 5%, actuals minus 2%. The middle one is our forecast, which is actuals to date and then flat to 2021, even though we know it's coming in around 9% higher, okay? But being a little conservative, then actuals up 2.5% over 2021, actuals up 5% over 21, actuals over 10%. So let's go down the middle, actuals flat. We know we budgeted $1.375 billion for 2022. Our forecast is it's actually going to come in closer to $1.46 billion. That difference is the $85.8 million. That difference is the 6.2%. But let's say our crystal ball doesn't work. Let's go over to the right. Let's go over 2 to the right, okay, and say actuals plus 5% over 2021. Same budgeted number of $1.375 billion, but now our projection goes up from $1.46 billion to $1.497. That's $122 or $123 million rounded over budgeted, and that's an 8.9% increase versus budget. No good analyst is not going to show you the downside also, okay? So let's go all the way over to the red, the dark red. Actual to date, because those are real numbers, then down 10% from 2021, starting in the July through the end of the year, August, thank you, August through the end of the year, are actually fall below the 2021 numbers by 10%. I'm going to repeat myself. We know it's up 9%, but what if? Well, the fact is, we have our same budgeted number. Our sales tax forecast will then only go to $1.386 billion. That is still $11.6 million over what we budgeted, for a percentage difference of 0.8%. So the bottom line is Nassau County's sales tax revenue can afford to drop below 2021 for the rest of the year by at least 10%, and we will still make budget. That's really important piece of information. All right, let's move on. We're going to go back to those positives and those risks, and I'm going to ask Lisa and Betsy, please jump in. So we've talked about sales tax. Other positive opportunities that we see in our forecast is state aid, $26 million in reimbursements, some various reimbursements, payroll and fringe savings of $30 million. I'm going to take you to the next page on that one because it's important. You know, it's what's really happening here. So if you go to Exhibit A, which is on page 10. There we go. Thank you. How did we come up with that $30.2 million, and there's a little variance here, it's not a big deal. We looked at salaries. The fact is, the cost of salaries will be lower, correct? Lisa, why don't I let you explain this?
Sure. So our projections, our methodology for projecting the salaries is we use the onboards as of June 30th, and then project out. So we show savings primarily due to vacant positions, the budgeted collective bargaining agreement amount that that OMB has in their 2022 budget, and then offsetting some of that are like higher costs that we have for overtime and obviously the longevity payment that just went out, and that like the net effect of all of those for just salaries alone is a positive 2.3 to the budget. For fringes, we are projecting a positive 24.9. I'm just looking at the lead. Oh, it's a little off on there. Yeah, sorry, 27.9. And what's driving that is we have a lower pension. We're projecting a lower pension expense. We've included the pension repayment that was done in 2022, so those somewhat offset each other. We're showing higher or more opportunity in health insurance for active and retirees, and offsetting that as well is in the budget there's a positive related to the collective bargaining agreements that are open that we are not projecting. So that whole total net comes out to 27.9.
Social services, we see an opportunity there. That's one of our positive variances on our forecast, and it really comes down to $6 million that we are going to see probably above and beyond what the state and federal government gives us for early childhood, preschool. It doesn't mean there are actually the expenses for early childhood preschool is actually going up. It's a negative to the budget, but we're showing the reimbursement will also go up with that. Medicaid, $21.6 million. Debt service, basically savings due to the delay in the issuance of new bonds in 2022. And then the other, which is the opioid litigation settlement. On the risk factors, the negative $88.6 million, let me say, rest assured, because we look at the budget on a GAAP basis, on an actual basis, we know, you know, that you are going to use the reserves that you so smartly put aside for property tax refunds, but we don't reflect that in the actual GAAP budgeting basis. So it is, until you do it, until it's paid, once it's paid, we'll reflect it, but until that point. So I don't want to minimize that negative $88.6 million, but I am confident that that $88.6 million, as long as you use the reserves to pay for that tax refunds, we're in good shape. Let's go to departmental revenues, and I'm going to take you to Exhibit B. Departmental revenues really have to do with the GIS tax map verification, your mortgage and deed recordings. We actually just got a report from the clerk's office. We have July numbers now. They were once again down 22% for the total number of transactions. That's not in dollar amounts. You know, why is it? Because, you know, mortgage rates are higher. I will say the Wall Street Journal reported today that mortgage rates are the lowest they've been since April, and they dropped below 5%. So that's a positive news for us when it comes to mortgage and deed recording fees. You know, the housing supply is way down here in Nassau County, and needless to say, the cost of homes have skyrocketed. So the good news is when you did your 2022 budget, if you look at actuals on mortgage deed and recording fees for 2021, they actually came in at $60.6 million. You dropped it. You were more conservative in your budget assumptions of 48.9, which is a 12% drop. It's a pretty significant drop. We still, based on what's happening, think there is some risk, and we're risking at $3.5 million. You know, bus fares, the fare box fees are down. People, you know, didn't take the bus as much. The revenue from income and expense law, there was $5 million for that in the budget. We just eliminated it because there's a lawsuit pending to see if you can charge those fees or not. Examination fees, this is something near and dear to my heart. There are no civil service tests. You know, let me repeat that. We cannot hire employees because, one, there are no tests for certain grades, certain positions. Two, the tests that were, the results aren't coming back, even though we just got one this week. Thank you, civil service. And three, some of the grade levels, the starting salaries are way too low. So examination fees, and we're risking that at $2.8 million. Ambulance fees are down. Other fees just scattered throughout the department, correct, Lisa, are down. So we are forecasting that we could see in departmental revenue a net negative to the budget, or less revenues of $32.8 million. Fines and forfeitures are our next risk, so I'm just going to take you right to Exhibit C. Boot and tow fees, I guess it's we need a executive order to lift that. Could start in September. School bus stop camera fees, that has not been implemented. That was something that I know I personally worked on when I was up in the New York State Senate. Public safety fees, we think it could be a little downward. Red light camera administrative fees, down a little bit based on what we've seen in 2000. And then other fines and forfeitures, which are really, I know there's an acronym, but not yet, TIPA, yes. Traffic and parking violations, thank you. And it's really based on trends there. So those are really the drivers of where we get to our forecast. I'm going to repeat, we believe Nassau County will end 2022 in a surplus based on GAAP reporting of $38.2 million. So please, questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, all of you, for that comprehensive presentation. I think it was very informative. I'm sure we'll, my colleagues up here join me in thanking you for that.
Pleasure.
I do have some questions, and I want to start with asking about the $38.2 million surplus in the context of the computation that is made to determine whether we are in a control period by NYFA. So does NYFA calculate, actually, let me ask it a different way. Does a possible surplus get calculated for the purposes of a control period the same way that you just calculated the surplus in 2022?
The answer is no.
Okay, so what is the formula that's used for this to determine whether there's a deficit or a surplus for 2022 for control period purposes?
Yeah, please. I was going to find.
Okay. This is easy. We started off talking about the three primary funds and the fact that we have a general fund definition for GAAP that's based on a GASB 54 statement that was executed, which was required as of 2011. At that time, when NYFA formatted and agreed upon their calculation, they were still using the old version of the general fund, which is less comprehensive than the one that's in the three primary funds that we use, that GAP uses. So as a result, many more funds are involved in this calculation, whereas which you get a $32.8 million surplus, but if you go to the what they call the five major funds, our surplus would be $160 million. And therefore, and this is on page 34 of the longer report, therefore, when you do the calculation, adding in or subtracting adjustments, it comes down to $178 million surplus, which is well over the 1% that you're required, that would put you into a control period.
So, just so I'm making sure I understand what you're saying. If you use the formula to be used to determine whether Nassau should be in a control period, we would actually have a surplus approximately 5.5 times the size of the surplus that your more accurate projection states. That's correct?
Right. Well,
And
ours
more
GAP.
comprehensive.
More
Yeah.
comprehensive.
Right.
More comprehensive calculation.
Right.
Going backwards from 2022 to 2021, but using the formula that's used for NYFA control period purposes, would there have been a surplus in 2021?
Yes. I've looked at this over time, and it's generally been that if there's a surplus under their calculation, there was a surplus under the three primary funds, it's a matter of degree.
So what would the surplus have been under that computation in 2021?
27.2 million.
Okay, so,
497.
Yeah.
okay. And how about 2020?
90.
Okay.
Sorry, I have the numbers right here. So, a 90.6 million, and in 2019 it was $76.8 million.
So under that control period computation, it would be 4 straight years of a surplus.
Correct. If you're including, if our forecast is correct in 2022. Yes.
Okay, and we're talking about the formula that's used, I assume, by NYFA to determine whether a control period is statutorily permitted, right? Okay.
Right.
So I guess my question is, why does NYFA still have a control period on Nassau County?
So let me make a comment here. And if you go to the ACFR, which is that big, thick, published report, we have a section, if I hadn't scribbled over it, I could tell you what page it was. Page 8, is that an 8? So let me, and I can send it to you, so don't worry. You don't have it in front of you. So NYFA may declare a control period upon making one of 5 statutory findings. And I'm not going to read all 5 of them, but they're right there on the page. Probably the 3, because 2 are, the 3 are 1. You just asked us, Legislator Veretti, for each of the fiscal years of 2019, 2020, and 2021, the county did not incur a deficit, therefore satisfied the requirements under Event 2. Event 1 is if we don't pay our principal and interest payments, and that obviously has not occurred. The second bullet point says the county satisfied event number 5, okay? According to NYFA's resolution dated December 7th, 2021, which approved the final multi-year plan for fiscal years 2022 through 2025 that included the 2022 budget. So NYFA approved the multi-year plan. Let me repeat that. NYFA approved the plan. One can always guess what might happen. Because what might happen in our homes, in our own budgets, what might happen in Nassau County, what might happen in Westchester County, or what might happen in Albany County are unknowns. But they set the goalpost there. In my opinion, is they are now moving the goalposts. At some point, it will be up to you, it will be up to the county administration to make sure that we continue to have fiscally sound budgets. But you're elected. I'm elected. The county executive is elected. We represent the people of Nassau County. NYFA is not elected. So to move those goalposts and to say what ifs in the future of Nassau County, I can only ask that they are applying those same variables to every county in New York State, not just Nassau County. There will be continued oversight by NYFA because we have debt outstanding till 2035. I am talking about the difference between not oversight, but between control.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like NYFA, if I'm reading you right, is making the case that the control period must continue because of future years. Is that correct?
It's what I've read.
All right. And are they basing that on their projections?
You'll have to ask them, sir.
I take your point. I agree with it. You know, we're an elected body, you're an elected official. And I would just note that NYFA made some projections about the 2022 and 2021 sales tax. And so did we. And I would challenge NYFA as to who was more accurate on their projections, the elected officials or the appointed NYFA body when it came to sales tax. So I agree with you. It seems like if they're going with the idea that, well, in the future we could have a problem, well, maybe at that point, if that happens, okay, they might need a control period.
That's
but
correct.
certainly today, it doesn't seem that we do. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that.
Speaking of NYFA, maybe you have some information about this because we can't get it. They've denied us this. Do you have any idea as to the work performed by their law firm, DeLaverson?
No.
Has that been?
No.
My understanding is they get $25,000 a month fee. They have not provided you any type of documentation supporting the work being done by that law firm?
No.
Talking about sales tax, and I think it's a very detailed report as projections of the remaining, 4 or 5 months of the year in terms of sales tax. Obviously, gas prices have increased dramatically, and I'm sure that has had an impact on people's spending. I want to talk about home heating oil, because the vast majority of residents that own homes in Nassau County heat their homes with home heating oil. And most people, probably, I would think, I was, under contract from last year through the winter portion of 2022, and so you're still paying the 2021 price through the middle of 2022. And I don't think there's a lot of Nassau residents that realize when that first fill-up comes in October, number one, the home heating prices are not following the gas prices. Gas seems to have decreased approximately 80 cents to the dollar. Home heating fuel has not. And so there are going to be, if this doesn't decline drastically over the next month or two, there's going to be a heck of a lot of Nassau residents that get a 275-gallon fill-up at $5 a gallon, not expecting that. So was that considered at all in your projections? And can you just kind of maybe tell us how you think that might impact sales tax, if at all?
Right. So I don't know if we went into that specific. It was more, gas tax, the relief that you passed to give the residents of Nassau County obviously was factored in. The home heating oil, just FYI, oil is down significantly again today. It's under $90 a barrel, so that's good news. Will our the companies that provide home heating oil reflect that? I don't know. The fact is, energy alone, energy is probably one of the largest geopolitical risks that the United States has right now. And, we can only hope that our elected officials do the right thing when it comes to balance for energy needs. I keep quoting the Wall Street Journal. It tells you what I read every day. But there was a wonderful, on the weekend, an article on the Wall Street Journal that talked about inflation and talked about gas prices. And it went into, like, the taco truck, the taco truck and the impact of that. And another example, various examples, like real-life examples, farmers. They used a farm example. And it was a great article because decisions that are made, and look, could we have prevented Russia from invading the Ukraine? Probably not. Could we have prevented, COVID? Who knows? But the fact is, the trickle-down effect, like you're referencing, is tremendous because it's not just, if you own a taco truck, it's not just the cost of beef, but it's taking those tractors out to drop off the bales of hay, for the steer that you're going to slaughter to and it keeps going down. So to answer your question specifically, did we take that into account? The answer is no, because we did more of a scenario analysis, what if, versus getting into that much detail. But the answer is you're correct. And the home heating oil companies may have bought futures a while ago, which is why they're not lowering that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's just something I remind people, when I speak to them, because, there's things you can do about the gas prices. You could get an electric car. You can get a hybrid. You could drive less. You got to heat your house.
Got to heat your house. You got to heat your schools.
Right.
You got to heat our buildings.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you for that answer. I have a question about, I saw in your report that there's a reduction in federal aid for the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program. So question one is, do you know, and I know maybe this isn't a question for you, but if you do know, can you describe what that program is?
I'm going to hand that to Lisa.
So the SCAP program is something that the county has been participating in for many years. There's a formula, there's an amount that is appropriated at the federal level every year that is shared among multiple, like nationwide, like the municipalities who house illegal aliens in their jails. And the formula is based on, I don't know the exact details at this point, but it's just they take actual costs for, correctional center officer salaries, and there's like a prorated amount, and then we get a piece. We don't know how much we're going to get because there's a pie and everybody has to share in that pie, but it's allocated. So over the last few years, we've noticed that they've only been reporting about $500,000 in there. It's budgeted at $1.5 million. So we took it down as a potential risk.
So do we know why we're getting less money? Do we know for sure? Is anybody?
No, we don't know for sure.
Is it possible it's due to the reduction in population in our correction facility?
It could be. It could also very well be that there's not as much money appropriated at the federal level to share.
Okay.
So again, we get only an allocation of that. We're not guaranteed anything out of that.
Yeah, I think it's something for budgeting purposes going forward we should probably kind of look into, because something tells me it's not a coincidence that since we've had a decrease in population in our correctional facility due to some of the laws coming from Albany, that we're getting less funding. It seems to line up with when that went into effect. So it's possible that it was maybe a reduction in overall federal funding, like you had said, or maybe it's based on population at the correctional facility. Just something to look into.
I know that there's a lag. I'm sorry. There's typically a lag in when we submit the reimbursement request and then when we get the funding. I know that we haven't received, it looks like we haven't received anything in at least a year or two. I thought I had that information with me, but I don't think I do.
All right.
Okay.
My last line of questioning before I hand it off. And maybe this is something you might say, ask Andy when he comes up.
Yep.
And that's okay. He's
Andy's the
waiting for
expert.
me.
Where are you, Andy? Andy, the expert.
All right. So I want to understand the diversion for AIM funding. Is that something I can ask you ladies about?
Diversion for AIM funding.
Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So my understanding is that 2 years ago, the state reduced the funding they provide to local municipalities and began diverting a portion of the county sales tax to a state fund, which they would then turn to the local municipalities to make up the gap in the reduction that they were funding to the local municipalities. Is that fair? That's what happened?
Yes, the AIM for the last 2 years had been taken out of, withheld from our sales tax collections. Since the county does not pay that AIM directly, it was never a gross revenue to the county. We did not report it as revenue correctly because we didn't have an expenditure to offset that.
Okay.
So if we received $100 from the state and AIM was $2, we reported $8 in revenue, correct?
Right, so we never even put that into our formulas here, right?
Correct.
Okay. So this began 2 years ago, right?
Yes,
Okay. Before that, they didn't do this?
correct.
Okay. So for the 2 years that this has occurred, how much money was diverted to county, from the county sales tax that we could have
About 11
computed
million.
in this calculation to the state?
It's approximately $11 million a year,
$11 million a year, so $22 million over those 2 years.
correct?
So that would have been an additional $22 million in surplus had that not been diverted, assuming we didn't spend it, right? Yes?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Similarly, distressed hospital fund. That's another one, right?
Yes,
Same concept? They divert money from our sales tax?
for a fund for distressed hospitals and nursing homes throughout the state.
At public hospitals or any hospital?
Public, I believe, yes.
Okay, so how much money was, when did that begin?
That was a 2-year program that ended last year.
So what about 2022?
No,
Okay, so 2020 and 2021?
correct.
How much money was diverted in 20 and 21?
That was about $7.5 million
Per year or total?
per year.
So 15 million.
Yeah, the timing is a little off because of how they take the money out, so it wasn't exactly 7.5 each year. For example, we had the residual AIM this year. 2020 had less because the program started later, so 2020 had a little bit more. But in effect, it was an average of $7.5 million a year.
Okay, taken from the sales tax for Nassau County and diverted into a fund for public hospitals in distress.
Correct.
Was any of that money, where is that money? Do we know?
It's at a state fund.
Do you know if any was released to NUMC?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, maybe I'll ask Mr. Persick in a little while. But we have no idea how that money has been accounted for. We just know it's in the state somewhere, in the state fund somewhere.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can I do a public service announcement here for a second, please? I'm sorry. But in Politico today, there's an article that Governor Hochul is using money for up to $3,000. Have you all seen it? For healthcare workers, and good for her. But let me highlight two. At the very bottom of the article that I read, there is also an additional $2.4 billion, assuming this reporter is correct, to upgrade antiquated healthcare infrastructure and lab capacity, and an additional $4 billion in aid to hospitals struggling as a result of the pandemic. Many hospitals took a huge financial hit during the pandemic when they canceled elective surgeries and other services. So if I could ask you, as really our voice to the public, residents of Nassau County, and if there are any Nassau County residents listening out there, if you could all reach out to your state elected officials and implore upon them to get some of this money for Nassau Healthcare Corporation. We deserve it here in Nassau County. And as you pointed out Legislator Ferretti, all this other money that we've been shipping out there, if it hasn't been given to Nassau Healthcare Corporation, let's get it back here. Sorry, had to do a public service announcement.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. And if NUMC is not in need, I don't know who is. So, all right. Presiding officer, you have some questions? And thank you.
I wanted to first thank you for the presentation. I found it very enlightening. In particular, I wanted to thank you, congratulate you on providing us with this chart on sales tax actuals. Obviously, we all look at what is coming in and what the checks are, and when we saw the dip, I mean, we're all concerned about what that means for the future of the county. So I thank you for putting that in perspective. It's good to know, that dip could be just something that occurs each year, as you said, cyclically, around Mother's Day.
Right after Mother's Day.
And I see that right after Father's Day, it reaches its bottom. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. So I think, we consistently, over the years, have been advocating for NYFA to step back, and we did it with Republicans and we did it with a Democratic administration, and much of the things that we approved with past administration was with an eye towards getting to that point. And I, along with all of us, are having difficulty understanding NYFA's refusal to leave the control period with this history of surpluses in the last 3 years, and with the projections that you're making and the projections that our budget office has made of surplus, anticipated surplus this year. Could you help me understand a little bit more about the deficit of 1% in terms of that as a trigger for ending or going into a control period? What time period are we talking about? Is that determined in the current year? Is it determined based on past years or prospectively?
Yeah, let's give it this.
I was going to read it exactly, but that calculation is done every year with the ACFR. So it's done based on the fiscal year and based on the accounting according to GAAP and GASB.
That's the prior year.
So it's the prior year.
It's the prior year, yes.
2021, in which the county had a $479 million surplus.
Right.
Okay. In the NYFA's report, they cite a number of concerns that they have. County's long-term liabilities for tax refunds, which actually we're in the best shape we've been in for years. Non-cert litigation, workers' comp claims, and contingent risks stemming from deteriorating finances of the hospital. I would assume that would be debt-related, but here's my point. Oh, go ahead.
Can I make a comment on the hospital? And we do have it in the mid-year report. We can find out what page. So the county's liability to the hospital is over the next 5 years, I believe, Betsy?
2029.
Through 2029. And in no case is it more than a $23 million debt payment. So if you want to, in the mid-year report on page 7, we clarify that, or what, because that comment, we've heard that comment made by NYFA. So we highlighted it to make sure that the people, the residents of Nassau County really understand the facts. And the fact is, NHCC is a New York State public benefit corporation. Its continuing financial problems, which we all know present an ongoing concern for the rating agencies. They do. However, the county guaranteed debt of the hospital is limited, manageable, and the financial liability of $132 million, so my number was correct, as of December 31st, 2021, has scheduled payments of no more than $23 million in any year through 2029. And I say this respectfully, of $23 million. That's a lot of money. But on a $3.6 billion budget, if that is the reason we're staying in control, I don't understand.
Thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying that. And I think that makes the point I was going to make, which is that they're remaining in control because of concerns in the out years. Those concerns have existed with every budget we've ever adopted. They will always exist. If that is the standard, the control period will never end. If we've gotten to the period where NIFR is perpetuating itself permanently, then they have, in fact, usurped the roles of elected officials, and I think that is improper. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Deputy Presiding Officer Coppell.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd like to, Madam Controller, congratulate you and your team on an extraordinary presentation. It's one of the best I've heard in a long time.
Thank you
From
very
that
much.
office.
A lot of hard work.
We appreciate that because you've shown a lot of in-depth knowledge of subjects that are being questioned, which are not even necessarily expected to come up at this kind of hearing. So I thank you for that.
It's the acronyms that we're still trying to get our
Right.
a handle on.
Just a couple things, not to rain on the parade, but the good news parade. But just talking about the sales tax, you're showing a 9%, give or take, increase year to date, right?
Right.
Okay. Which is kind of equivalent to where the inflation rate is. Which wouldn't that indicate essentially a flat degree of spending?
I'm smiling because a lot of reports I've been reading recently, they talk about how wages have been going up pretty significantly, but because of the cost of inflation, the fact is we're all being paid less. But the bottom line is the actual sales tax revenue or the sales tax revenue are the numbers of the numbers of the numbers that are coming in. After inflation, net out inflation, I mean, it's still whatever, $678 million. I don't know.
Right, the numbers are the numbers.
Numbers are the numbers.
Versus the budgeted numbers, there's no question that there's an increase, but I'm afraid that it might be simply indicate a flat degree of spending versus in terms of the goods and services that are being purchased.
Right. And if we have flat, we'll be okay.
Yes, yeah. I understand that, and you're projecting even if we go down a bit, we'll still be okay.
Right.
Yeah. Which does worry me a little bit as well about the future, about a bit of a risk, and that would be because of perhaps timing. And here's what I mean by that. We all hope, I'm sure, that inflation does abate, comes down a bit. Now, our expenses here in the county, I would think you would agree, tend to lag the inflation rate. In other words, our contracts, we have forward contracts. We'll sit here once a month and approve contracts. We'll do a lot of that, and actually more than once a month. So those contracts tend to be for a year, for several years, and so forth. Those contracts are going to be going up as hopefully inflation is coming down. That does, to my mind, indicate a red flag, or at least a yellow flag, indicating caution for the future. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And just one more item, which is, I'd love to hear your opinion on it as well, and that would be with respect to the federal aid. The extraordinary amount of federal aid that we have due to the COVID situation. So we're talking about, give or take, over a 2-year period, about $400 million. Just short of that.
That's
just
correct.
short of $400 million.
Yes.
Right. Not that long ago, we this body approved something of a giveaway, which actually didn't give away quite as much as anticipated, right? It was a relatively smaller amount.
Correct.
Right.
And the HAP program, are you referencing?
So,
Yes.
would you agree that the remaining revenue from the first year as well as the entirety of the second year's installment represents a very significant one-time opportunity if we use that money for permitted purposes instead of borrowed money or budgeted money for those same permitted purposes? Wouldn't that be very prudent to do it that way, so that we ensure ourselves for the future when the federal aid stops and for various reasons?
If you're asking my opinion, sir, the answer
Yes.
is yes, absolutely. You have a tremendous, each and every one of you have a tremendous opportunity to do good for the residents of Nassau County. I don't know if you read or saw that New York State, because it depleted its unemployment fund, which was $9.1 billion, is now going to start charging businesses across New York State $27.66 per employee to recoup those costs at a time when our small businesses lost employees. So I guess I'm doing a PSA for small businesses right now, but there is tremendous opportunity that you have to put this money to work.
Right. Put this money to good long-term use and perhaps save expenses in the future rather than
Exactly.
dissipate it on short-term.
As long as it's not expended on, expenditures that get embedded.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. That's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Legislator DeReggie Whitten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Continuing with what Howard was speaking of, there is a tremendous amount of money there. I've been trying to figure out how this money gets allocated. Believe it or not, the legislature doesn't have a lot of power with this. We do vote to accept the funding, but the prior administration agreed to do a survey, which Hofstra did, and the results were that the Nassau County residents wanted help for our small businesses as well as help for low-income families. And that was the results of the survey, and that's how we went about deciding how to do that. The truth of the matter is most of the decision-making would really rely upon the administration without the legislature's approval. There's nothing, the prior administration agreed to have the legislature vote for it, but there's not much we can do after the funding is accepted. It could just be arbitrarily decided, just as though the HAP program was stopped without anything in its place to start. And the reason that I still would like to see HAP, and Howard and I might not agree with this, but I don't think it took a long time for us to figure out how to give money to low-income families during that time. So by the time it really was in place, we had this election. We had, so we didn't really even get a chance to promote it as well. But we're going to submit, and I was hoping it was going to be bipartisan, and I welcome it to be bipartisan, but a piece of legislation that would say that the money that will be allocated should come to the legislature so we can vote on it. Because I think all of us, with all of our constituents, we worked very well together last time. Legislator McKevitt and I were on the committee, and it was really interesting, and we put a lot of time into it. And I think I think what Howard's saying is true. I do know there are a lot of restrictions as far as I know. We can't use it for salaries.
Okay. A lot of
can't
restrictions.
Use it for CARES Act money. We have to clear the salaries. Okay, so if there's opportunities for us to use it for salaries, these are the things that I would like to see. I know that the only capital improvements that were allowed were for water, because somehow the federal government said that was okay because it probably has to do with disease. So we were able to do that with a few projects, and I would love to see more
correct.
like that. I'm going to be submitting that piece of legislation. I would love to have you and anyone else who wants to be part of it. It would basically just say we want to work together to make sure that the funding is used appropriately and in our best way. We also only have till what, the 2026 to spend it
To
all.
spend.
And it's not so easy. Like, as we
2024.
saw, you know, with HAP, we thought we'd spend $100 million. We didn't. There's also Boost Nassau, which helped our restaurants, I hear, is depleted. I don't know how much, but I hear there's not much left. That's what some people have been told in my office even. So maybe we need to have money switched into there immediately to help the restaurants that are still struggling. Plus, they have all these other expenses now. It's such a whirlwind. But anyway, I do have a piece of legislation. I believe I have some co-sponsors on my side. And, I would like to get as many as we can, because this is not partisan whatsoever. It's just we want to represent all of our constituents, and this is a one-time opportunity. And so I also am concerned about the money that's sitting in the opioid settlement. I think I haven't heard any plans for that, but I think that would also be something that we should possibly have a hearing for up here. And, again, how much power we have is probably not really there, but for the best interest of our constituents, the more we're involved, I think the better. And that also, that money, to me, every day that it sits in a bank account and it's not going out to help people that really need our help in this time. I mean, opioid deaths are up. The fentanyl problem is just a disaster. The money has to be spent correctly, but it has to go out quickly. We have groups that I was at National Night Out and approached by 2 different groups that really need the money, and it's sitting in our bank account. And I feel like it's almost like, I don't want to say, but it's almost, we're going to have responsibility on our hands if we don't extend it as quickly as possible.
And I apologize for interrupting, and a lot of that money is at the village level also, that they have funds that they have not appropriated yet, so.
Yeah, but we do have 50 million.
No, we have a lot here
Plus,
too. I'm
yeah.
not,
Which I would really, again, I mean, even $1 million goes so far for some of these programs, 50 million for us. Well, right, and, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got it. Here, we should have been talking.
so I'm just asking to make sure that I can say this publicly, but just so you know, and it's the one piece of information that we know at the Comptroller's Department, is the ARPA awards for the non-for-profits. These were non-for-profits that already, and I'm looking at Beaumont back there, already had contracts with Nassau County. Those award letters are about to go out. And the reason we know that, and I don't want to steal Anissa Moore's thunder here by any means, is because we're putting procedures in place to make sure that there are check and balances on how that money either has already been used, because in many non-for-profits the money has already been spent and it'll just be a reimbursement, but we make sure we get receipts, for lack of better word, or that if it hasn't all been spent, there's a procedure for them to ask for the money from us. So that's, I think,
great.
a little over $16 million.
That's what I was going to ask Beaumont. but I didn't wanna put-
16.7 million, I think.
So
it is.
16 million out of the 59 has been allocated. Well, that's start, but
Yeah.
again, this
And a
is
great cause to our non-for-profit organizations that really do serve our communities in need.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. But again, there's a lot more there that we need to do. But we're in a crisis mode, in my opinion, with the opioid situation. I also read, and I don't remember where, I can't quote it right now, but that New York City has found a way to reimburse students in graduate programs for opioid, social work or clinical psychology type thing, through funding. So I don't know if there's a way we can look into that, see if there's some kind of tuition reimbursement, because we need more social workers. There's such a need for them right now more than ever. So again, I am going to submit this piece of legislation with whoever wants to join in would be more than welcome. I'd also like to include something with the villages as well, or any other municipalities, just so that this, again, this funding is once in, I said it was once in a lifetime when we had FEMA funding after Sandy, but this is similar. You know, it's something that we have to use correctly. And again, I think I've been reading lately about the Jeffersonian type of attitude with government, and it's not trusting government in the sense that we want checks and balances as many times as possible, as many eyes as possible. And I really, truly can tell you, I believe in that. I believe that we should be checked. I believe the more people that look at things and the more ideas, the better we serve our constituents. So, so that was my statement on that. I also agree with my colleagues that we would love to see NIFA go, and I do see the projections that NIFA gives us for the next 3 years are pretty grim.
I haven't seen the report yet.
Oh.
I think it came out
I
this
have
morning,
it.
and I was a little
Yeah.
busy prepping for
Oh,
this
no,
one.
I get it. Don't ever. Yeah, this morning. No, did it? Okay, so for 23, they have a deficit of 42.3 million. For 24, we have a deficit of 93.4 million. For 25, we have a deficit of 118 million. Projected, obviously. Everything is projected. And that's the problem with, sales tax. We lived through the Sandy years. We know it's very hard to project. But those are pretty grim. So you haven't had, I'm not going to ask you because you haven't had a chance to review them. But
Nor
at
would
some
I
point, I
comment.
would love to hear what you think of those projections and if you think it's,
Well, it's really going to be up to you to come up with a multi-year plan, correct? You do that on an annual basis, so you'll just move it out. What you produced and NIFA approved was for 22, 23, and 24, I believe. I don't have it in front of me. So I'm speculating, but my guess is you'll do one for 23, 24, and 25, and you are the elected
Right.
representatives
Well, we
of
were
Nassau
very
County.
conservative, and actually, the Laura Kern administration was very conservative in a lot of ways. There was people, that was saying, "Oh, don't worry, sales tax will be great. You don't have nothing to worry about." But I watched Gary Cantor quite often too, and he was very concerned. And that was like a good education for me. We really were careful, and I want to continue to be careful. But I would like to know where they got these numbers. I'm going to do my own research, but unless, like what you just mentioned with the sales tax, it sort of surprises me that their numbers are as grim. And I can tell you something about sales tax. If the Witten family is any example, my youngest is going to college, and we just boosted sales tax.
We have
My
a,
husband
we have
said,
a
"Where does she
wedding
think
in a
she's
month.
going to like a desert?" She has enough hair product for like the next 5 years if it was me. But anyway, so I just had a couple other quick questions. As far as inflation, and obviously nobody knows what's going to happen, but are you concerned about the county itself with their expenses? Like I saw you had a couple of questions, but like we said, even for our fuel costs this winter, is there any debt that we have to worry about as far as that's not locked in? Like, do we have any variable? It's all locked in. Thank God.
It was all locked in as of 2021.
Okay.
The county itself is not, the county as an organization is not allowed to have variable rate debt, but NIFA and NUMIC or NHCC were allowed, and they unwound those variable rate
Right.
debts.
So thank God our
last
debt
year.
service shouldn't change that much with the interest rates
Right,
going up.
right.
All right, well, that was a good move. All right, I guess also, I hear that a lot of our savings are coming from not hiring, and whether or not that's because we can't get the tests, which I totally have heard before. That's a real problem. But there are some vacancies, I understand, that can be filled now, and I hope that we do that as soon as possible, because I know certain DSS and other DPW, a lot of our departments are suffering right now, and there's always that circular thing. If they suffer, it ends up costing us more money in the long run, I believe. So, if there's any way we could check with that. And, I had one other quick question. When we do the American Rescue Plan, I know we're now including the veteran, much more veteran groups, even the ones that aren't brick and mortar. And I know that we put like $2 million in, but I would love to see even more of that and more public advertising for that as well. And I'm trying to think that's pretty much it. But I want to just make one more statement, Elaine, and that is that I really, number one, appreciate your presentation today, but more than that, I appreciate how responsive you personally have been and your office. It's such a refreshing thing to see. In my opinion, it's a common sense attitude to have because you represent all of Nassau County, not just certain districts. And as a legislator who happens to be in the minority right now, I can't thank you enough for your professionalism and for your, just your consideration for all of your residents, not just those that are in certain districts. So, thank you.
Thank you, Delia. I'm going to just pass it off to Arnie, but before I do, just want to say a few words. In terms of the federal money that we received due to COVID, my understanding is that we do vote on any money allocated for a specific purpose. For example, HAP, we voted for HAP. We voted for the money to the VFWs. It's not that the administration just has carte blanche to do whatever they want with it. We put our stamp of approval on that. So I do think that there was a little bit of confusion there.
Can I just mention, just with the HAP money, I mean, we voted to put that money in there, and it was just stopped without our consideration, which, I mean, look, maybe we would have voted to do that anyway. But we don't, from what I understand, we have the right to accept the funding, but not so much as to where it's spent. And you can do the research yourself. Don't take my word for it.
But we did vote for HAP. I mean,
Correct, but
now,
that was...
if it was not all spent, perhaps we would have to vote
Correct.
to reallocate that money somewhere else. But it cannot be spent without our approval.
I don't believe that, I think it was the Laura Curran administration that agreed to that. Unless you can find it somewhere, I don't know where that says that.
Okay.
But you can look at it, because trust me.
As far as I know, there hasn't been a dollar spent under either the previous administration or this current administration without our approval, including the money for the VFWs.
Nothing has been, nothing.
Right.
However, going forward, unless you can find something that I can't find, there's nothing that says that we have to vote on. Actually, there was, I think, it's just common practice, and if it continues without us having to have this piece of legislation, great. But the fact that that program was stopped without, number one, us even knowing where the money is going at this point, that money could be reallocated without our control. And
Well, my understanding that program was modified by federal guidelines. I know you indicated before it was for low income. It originally was not. What we voted on was for that payment to be made to any household with that can get STAR, which
Right.
is under $500,000. I
Right.
wouldn't classify that as low income.
but
It
there
was-
was an income
It was,
element.
it was
Right.
changed. My understanding is it was changed to households under, I want to say 75,000, right? So,
Less, yeah.
quite frankly, if that was the rules from the beginning, the vote might not have gone the way it did. So, I don't necessarily, I think maybe that was part of I don't want to speak for the administration, but the bottom line is, what we voted on did change. It was suspended after it changed.
The only thing I'm saying, I mean, and you can look at it yourself, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this, but from what I'm understanding, we vote to accept the funding, and the HAPA money, right, we reappropriate the money, but we don't.
Well, there's a difference there.
But
Accepting it and appropriating.
and then reappropriating to the line, but not necessarily to these programs. So I want to just be as careful as we can be with this money.
Fair enough.
If you want to look at my piece of legislation, if you have any adjustments, I welcome it. I would love to have the peace of mind knowing that, the 19 of us have a say as to how this is being spent. And right now, from what I can see, there's nothing solid in any piece of legislation that reassures us of that. And I think it would benefit everyone. Again, it goes back to checks and balances. I don't care who would be county executive we want it to be checks and balances, and again, just take a look at it, do some research. I'm open. I would give it to you if you want, and I just want the piece to go through. All right?
All right, second point, just for my last point then, Artie, then you're up, Artie, I promise. Because I think it's important in the context of this hearing today. So I don't want to seem like I'm being critical of the prior administration in this, because there is a point that relates to today. The idea that there was a quote-unquote conservative projection from the prior administration as to sales tax, I don't agree with that. I don't believe it's a conservative projection when the projection causes an increase in borrowing, deferment of repayment of that borrowing 2 years because of that lower than realistic projection. So I would not characterize it as a conservative projection. And why that's important for today is because I think it highlights the necessity for the projections from the Comptroller's Office and from the Budget Office to be accurate. That's how we base our decisions up here on what we're voting on. And what we saw under the last year of the last administration was not a conservative treatment. It was a conservative projection. It was a negligent projection. And we had to base our votes on that. So I think it highlights the point and why we're so appreciative of the work you put into this, because we need these projections to be accurate, and I think and I hope that they are. So thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Drucker.
Thank you, Chairman Ferretti. I was waiting for the introduction. Thank you. And I'd like to echo my colleagues' sentiments. Controller Phillips, I think you did a fantastic job. Kudos to you and your team. You know, I'm a lawyer, and I always have the utmost respect and admiration for people who can crunch numbers and take out their crystal balls and project what the future is going to be. My eyes glaze over when it comes to that, and so I appreciate your presentation that you did. You know, I think all of us would agree that really we're living in unprecedented times, and from a financial standpoint, that, you know, we've never seen, I don't know if we'll ever see again with regard to the federal aid and the state aid that we have received as a result of COVID, and the tremendous uptick in sales tax as a result of being shut down for a period of time. So I have concerns, because now we're seeing, you know, the Federal Reserve Bank having raised interest rates twice now, totaling 150 basis points.
That's correct.
In an effort to slow our economy down, reduce spending, which is going to have an increase in unemployment. And they project that there will be less spending and therefore less sales tax. So I appreciate that in your presentation you did factor in or take into account the possibility of having a lower sales tax revenue. But what are your projections? I didn't see them. What are your projections for the major funds? Because I know that there was a divergence between what OMB projected, what OLBR projected, what NYFA's projected. I'd like to hear what your projections are for the major funds.
So if you're referencing the major funds and the way that NYFA looks at the world, which is the major funds, our forecast would say that we will end the year with $160 million surplus on a budgetary basis, at least. On a GAAP basis, it works out to be $178.3 million surplus.
Can you explain why that's such a difference?
I'm going to give it to Lisa right now.
Sure. So in the three primary operating funds, the way we have the report towards the front, we're looking at a lot of the reserve funds as well. They're included as part of the general fund. And so the $362 million that was allocated to the litigation fund for tax certiorari, for other litigation, for longevity, all of those expenditures and those projected expenditures are also included. So some of the big swings would be, you know, we're projecting that out of the litigation fund, out of that tax certiorari reserve, we're likely to spend about $100 million. So that's included in the 3 primary, whereas it won't be included in the budgetary, in the, on the 5 major, as we say. I mean, there are some other, small swings between, like, sewer. If sewer gets a transfer in from the Sewer Finance Authority, that's another $144 million. So we do look at both because we have to look at the 5 major funds for the NIFA calculation as well.
So once again, Legislator Drucker, the 3 operating funds is a more comprehensive look at the county versus the 5 major operating funds.
Right.
I have an amazing cheat sheet that I'm going to share with
I would
you
like that,
because
yes.
it is confusing, right? You put this together for us?
She gave me the information.
And Betsy put it together. So it will help you visually see what is in the 3 operating funds, what is in the 5 major funds. The NIFA has another quirkiness to it. What is in what they call the primary governmental activities, and then total government funds. When you see it visually, you'll see this 3 operating funds is more
I've
comprehensive.
benefited from cheat sheets my whole life, so. one more
I got
would
one
be great.
for you.
In Exhibit B and C in your presentation, I have a question. I do a lot of real estate. So the housing, you have the tax map verification fees and the mortgage and deed recording fees, which are ridiculous fees, to be honest with you. I've been railing against them for years. But you project a variance of $8.7 million and $3.5 million. I was under the impression that the real estate market has been rather robust until a couple of months ago, at least in my experience. So I don't really know why the first half of 2022 was such a decline. I would think that it was still rather robust until, I would say, April, May.
Give us 1 second here, and we'll get some of the assumptions that are in Exhibit B. The assumption in Exhibit B are in the larger report, the mid-year report, on page 15, so it allows us to get there. Did we get those from the departments?
Yeah, so, do you want me to
Yeah,
talk to that?
please.
So, what we did primarily for the mortgage and deed recording fees is we got some input from the departments about where they felt.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
So for the mortgage and deed recording fees, what we did was we got input from the department about some of their projections, and then we looked at the actual trend that's been
Right.
happening. And the amount of, the volume itself has been dropping, and it's been dropping significantly. So we applied a percentage to that against last year's. We took whatever the percentage was in the drops from last year and then applied it to the remainder of the year.
Yeah, no, I don't fault you. I think you're correct in forecasting a downward trend because I do anticipate the real estate market contracting even further for the next few months anyway until things stabilize. So I do agree that you need to forecast downward. I was just curious where the first 6 or 8, first 5-6 months of this year were at. Also, all of the fines and forfeitures, same thing. Why are you forecasting downward on that? The school bus stop camera, for one, that's a program I initiated, and with the help of my colleagues here, we approved, we got that going, and it's going nowhere. We budgeted $2 million for it, and we still have $2 million in there. I mean, what do you? Any comments on that?
You ought to speak to the county administration, sir. Yeah. We don't. We know that no money to date has been. So we're conservatively forecasting that if the program doesn't get going soon, that the $2 million worth
'Cause
of revenue.
I read that Suffolk County is doing great in their bus camera situation. You know, they are.
I had read somewhere that the towns were taking over that program.
They had the option to. I
The
think
option.
certain school districts are like laying back and waiting, and that's a problem because they're not taking advantage of it, and that's a loss for the county.
But that is correct, Legislator Ferretti. The towns can opt in and take it. I
And-
believe the town of Hempstead
We-
did.
The program we have, isn't it an opt-in program by the
Yes.
school districts?
Yes, it is.
That's correct.
Is that the same in the town program?
I believe so.
They're opting in with the town, not the...
That's correct, without the cap bursts.
Yeah, so, no, I mean, I guess Suffolk County doesn't have that. What else? I see overtime, large variance in overtime. Is that something, how are you forecasting that in terms, that's Exhibit A, I guess.
Yep.
You're forecasting a variance of $22.5 million in overtime. Can you explain that to me, and should we be concerned about that?
Yep. I'm just trying to get to the right page.
I'm going to give Lisa a second here to get to the right page, but I know, as an example, in our claims division, because there have been no tests or any tests that have come out, there's no results. We have claims. The HAP program is an example to process. I know in our department alone that we have authorized overtime in order to do the business of the people. So, but let Lisa speak in a
Well,
broader.
I think you also mentioned in your report about law enforcement, police, and sheriffs and the like of overtime in those departments.
Yes, so the main driver of the overtime, well, it's split probably half and half between the police, the two police funds, police district and police headquarters, and correctional center. In the large report on page 26, we have a table that breaks that out. I'm just looking for my, just bear with me. I'm looking for my, don't have anything organized here. I have some backup on salaries.
That's okay. But I will say, we did factor, although we factored also in the two classes, the police classes and the correction officers classes.
Yes.
That are coming in still in 2022 also.
Yes. So we're saying that we believe at this point, based on the trends, that the correctional center is going to be underfunded by about $11.7 million, and exactly the same amount for the two police funds. And that's basically based on trends. We do pick up the projected.
Because of overtime?
The overtime, that is just the overtime. That's just overtime for those two. And that's mainly just because I think they budgeted for, I believe they even budgeted for like an examination for police officers, and that didn't happen. And we also have we're factoring in the new classes as well. But that's the trend at this moment.
Okay. Thank you. I got a bunch of questions I guess I'll reserve for Andy. He looks like he's fallen asleep there. We'll get him up there in just a little while. I asked this rep that she did.
Great.
So thank you very much, Controller Phillips. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Legislator Drucker. Everybody else? Good. Again, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for
Yeah.
your time and your extensive work on this. We'll do it again in a year.
Yeah, great. Well, actually, we'll
6
do it
months.
this fall when you
Yeah,
guys
couple months.
work on your budget, and I wish you the best on that. And because it's not easy right now. Legislator Drucker, you mentioned it, and Legislator Ferretti, you definitely mentioned it, that we are in unprecedented times right now. So the most we can do to protect the people of Nassau County is not to overtax, not to take more money when we don't believe we need it, but to keep Nassau County in the fiscal position, the solid fiscal condition that we're in.
We
So
are stewards
any
of-
help we can give
We
you.
are stewards of that money.
You are stewards of, we are all stewards of that money, and it's our money. So, so thank you. Thank you for the great work, and thank you for having us today.
Thank you.
Great.
And we're going to have Mr. Persick and the budget team come up. We're just going to take a 2-minute break for technological adjustments, and then we'll get started.
Mr. McKenna, you're out of order here, please.
right, before the legislators could take their seats. All right. Mr. Persick, let's rock and roll.
Good afternoon. Let's hope there's no rocks. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'd be remiss not to thank my staff who's sitting next to me, Chris Nolan, Irfan Qureshi, and Irina Siddiqui. They're the main core of my, I will say, the story we're about to tell to the legislature, which I think is, a little different since I've taken this role. I have to thank the county executive for continuing my service here and continuing the plan that we have in place. So, and I look forward to working with him. We've been working very hard on strategically getting rid of some of what I will say are what we've now termed as a different world in which we're living in, the liability management side of the county, which is something we were always chasing revenue. Now we're figuring out how to pay down some of our outstanding obligations, which is a little different for everybody who's been here. We're in a completely different storyline than we were 2 years ago. So I'm going to go through the presentation. I always say it's going to be brief, but we know sometimes that it will, there may be some other questions that may come out of this. So here's the major accomplishment that I will say, which is, with the help of, I will say the county executive did a roadshow with me when we went to see the rating agencies. But, it'd be remiss not to thank this body, because how we got here is partnerships and coordinated efforts on how we did the financing. We got 2 bond upgrades from Moody's and S&P, which were monumental. I think it's been over 10 years. Fitch was a little remiss, but they gave us a stable outlook. So, I mean, we're heading on the right trajectory, and our behavior has to continue in the path which we were on. We need to control spending, we need to watch our revenues, and budget conservatively as we have been. I will say the controller covered, I think, this pretty well, but we did finish in, I think it's historical, if I may say, with the largest surplus in county history. We then took that money and put it into the right places where I think it's going to best benefit us in the future for what may occur down the road. If we hit the recession, other things, we've taken care of some of the CERT obligations, we've taken care of some of our litigation obligations, we've put some money into debt service reserves, we put some money in retirement reserve contributions, and anything we finish with this year, I will say, that pattern will continue, so that if we do have some type of an event, COVID-2, God forbid, a Sandy 2, God forbid, or something like that, and we see a downturn in sales tax, we will be well positioned not to have to borrow for anything, to have our obligations met with our current resources that we have at our disposal. So painfully got there, as we all know, but we're here now, and now I think we have to be careful how we proceed. And I caution that because, when you see numbers like this, you're all like, and I would be too, but I think we still need to be, one thing I do, and this is what I will say, is we do micromanage expenses down to make sure that we're getting the best value for every dollar we're sending out the door. So part of what we do is protect the taxpayer's interest on what we're spending money on. So that's what we do in OMB. You can hear my name, probably has a lot of different adjectives before it. I'll be kind about that and some of the department heads, but that's okay, because that means we're doing our job. And I mean, I will scrutinize anything that I think doesn't fit what the needs are of the county. And the county evolves like business and everything else into different directions. So that's on the surplus. As you can see, I just went over this. This is our 4th straight year, and I will go back. Let me just tell you, this is, in 2018, we got hit with Recibo, if you remember correctly. Even though we show a deficit in there, we did move money into the litigation reserve, which kind of skews that number, but it'll be 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 if things continue down the path of years of surpluses. So a couple of just go back one slide. I just want to cover a couple things that were on there. We did pay down the pension amortization, which we don't owe the state and have to keep paying that. It doesn't have a real big fiscal impact, but there is savings. It's because it's like amortizing a mortgage. You're stretching the payments over. But it is fiscally prudent that we're not paying the state additional resources of 5% for the money, because theoretically we're borrowing the money from them. The other thing we did, we took out the NIFA swaps and the NHCC swaps, which kind of fixed out our debt, which is a better way for us to operate. So moving forward, I think we covered this. So the big drivers, as you are aware, was in 2021, I will say, sales tax clearly. We've had many debates about it, and we can still debate where that number lies, but that was the driving force. Plus, on top of the $362 million we got in, we had organic savings, I will say, from better than anticipated revenues in certain areas, although not so much on the revenue side, but I think on the expense side, some of the drivers were some debt service savings, some fringe benefit savings, some salary savings. So I think we benefited from just regular organic operations to the tune of $120 million. So, and again, I said what we did with the money, we put it into, all these different litigation funds and bond indebtedness funds. This chart, no, go to the next one, I'm sorry. On page 6, where we're at, if you don't mind, this is how we spent the money from the resources in 2021. $30 million to retirement reserve, $20 million to litigation, $20 million to bond indebtedness. We put $208 million for certs, and I'll get to that story later on. We were able to solve the longevity problem, which was a huge liability to this county if we lost it in arbitration, and other litigation for other matters that may come up that we may have to be involved in. There's some old Article 18 cases that are still existing out there, which is similar to the Keyspan. We have Verizon and a couple sister ones out there that do have significant dollars associated with it, and we will continue to manage and come up with structured settlements that are fair and equitable to both parties. But that's kind of the game plan where we're at, and that's one of the edicts that the county executive has given me is, keeping the liability side and managing, controlling the glide slope as opposed to surprises with judgments. So I'm going to get to 2022, which is where we're at now. The controller covered this pretty well. I mean, I think we're all pretty close to, I read OLBR Maurice's report. I read the controller's report. Some differences in what we think. I mean, we're thinking collective bargaining. Hopefully we can settle with all the unions. Whether that happens or not, that's going to be a moving target. Fringe benefit savings, we should have some additional savings there. We do have some savings in Medicaid and other resources in DSS just as a result of the state funding. Our biggest revenue driver, which is the source of a lot of, I would say, contention is that sales tax right now is on a glide slope that I think even despite all the stuff that's going on out there, it's going to be hard pressed for us to go negative at this point. And I think Controller Phillips did a great job, and I have to thank her for the kind words, and working with her has been a pleasure for the few months that we've done it. But I do think that, some of these question marks about where the economy is, and to legislate Coppell about commodity prices and CPI almost following, mirroring itself and sales tax going up, I do believe that there will be a slowdown, but I think there's other things that just people do naturally. They have to buy food, they have to buy books for the kids. I think that's part of the thing. The luxury items is where we have to be concerned about, and the housing market, which I think Legislator Drucker, you were asking about the housing market, and I was sitting back there because it's transactional driven, and it's not so much the inventory is not there to sell. So I think that's why we're starting to see the dip. That's what it is. There's not enough inventory out there, which is creating the anomaly of pricing going up along with interest rates. So the transactional volume, some of the people who could afford 2 years ago now just can't afford it. And if you talk to the real estate people, they're going to tell you the same thing. The market went from here, now it's going all over the place to like a normalized market. So
No, I agree with this.
so but why the revenue streams are down, it's driven by transactions, and that's, I just wanted to cover that. So we're projecting in this forecast a 5% growth in sales tax. We've accounted for the disproportionate hospital and the AIM payments. We've taken that out. We're getting that back, thank you, because the legislator Ferretti's point that they were stealing from my money, and I hated it, but that's just me. As far as where the AIM money, and there was a question about where the AIM money went. The AIM money they took it from us and gave it to the towns and the villages. They did gratuitous act that they may believe they gave our money to them. The disproportionate hospital, I do believe that Newmark got a portion of it. What number that is specifically, I don't know if they got $1 for dollar from our money, but that's one of the main driving that dish money or dish money that they get. So we also the projections also include for sales tax include the reduction of the gasoline holiday we're giving out. We've taken it's approximately $8 to $10 million we're calculating it at. Although as Controller spoke oil prices are coming down. I can tell you personally, when you saw $3.97, you're driving like a lunatic to try and get in there and fill up, you know what I mean? Because it's under $4, and it's like, it's the old days, because I'm dating myself, you know, the 70s, where you waited online and you had to get gas on odd even days, so. As far as contract negotiations, we are moving forward. The county exec wants to get everything settled so that we can move forward with all the labor unions. We're working diligently to resolve the outstanding issues with some of the bargaining units. I don't want to say more than that because we're in negotiations, so I will say that it is ongoing and it's an active work stream. Again, I think I covered this already, and I think the controller covered this. I don't want to be redundant. Some of the things we've offset is parks revenue, ambulance fees. Red light cameras are diminishing, I will say that, but activity is starting to go back up because if anybody's driven in lately, you can see the volume of traffic, even in the summertime on the highways, is still, it's getting, which is the worst scenario with gas prices being so high and you're sitting in traffic. It's like, you know, you're watching a needle. So those are the things we're starting to see declines, but I think you're going to start to see the normalization once we get back to September, once school reopens, if it reopens in the old-fashioned manner, if I like normalcy, if we ever can term it that way, if it comes back to being that. So if that happens, I think you'll start seeing some of this transaction volume tick back up, and, you know, we'll get back to it. So our expense assumptions are pretty right before you. Mass transportation, we've added a little bit more money for commodity prices. We've taken some hits on the risk side of what's going to happen. Like I said, we had Medicaid savings, which we're using to fund some of these other issues that we have. The state comes up with a formula, and it's another, I don't want to get into it, but it's a weekly share thing, and then there's things for indigent care and everything else that they net out. But a weekly share dropped this year, which provided us with a $22 million surplus in Medicaid. So we've offset that with some early intervention costs that we think are going to rise and some mass transportation. I know the Long Island station maintenance agreement went up because the CPI went up, so that was a pretty big hit because CPI was so high it's contractually obligated. So okay, now to the liability management, which again I said this is the whole, I have to say that this is the position that we're in now, is how we're going to manage the future going forward. One of the steps we did take in this budget is we paid back $123 million of approximately $160 million. We're working on paying down the police district. It's a little sticky because it's a separate taxing district. I'm formulating an idea, which I have to run by the county executive, on how to pay down that additional liability. Possible use of fund balance in the district, but I have to make sure, because I'll get to the NYFA gap if you want me to. That's not a positive to that, but it would make fiscally good sense if we did something like that. But that's, I will say, stay tuned on that. It'll probably be, if we can get that liability off, and we'll be moving forward. The county executive got rid of the LIPER hangover, or whatever you want to call that cert liability of $300 million. We were able to broker and get rid of that liability. That's a big thing off the books in the NYFA report. I will say that, you know, we have to account for. Additionally, the longevity settlement. One thing I guess, you know, I was remiss about when I got involved in this was that time wasn't our friend on this thing. And the longer we let it sit, the greater the liability grew, because the retroactivity portion of it from it would have grown. So we saved, I mean, if we would have lost an arbitration, it would have cost us $188 million. We got it down to $100 million, which we funded with reserves, which gave us a funding stream to get through to the next 4 years. And any residuals going forward, if we see need to fund that reserve a little bit more for the future, maybe we'll have the resources to do that. So, but it's subject to collective bargaining for future agreements, and we'll move on from there. Okay, tax certs. After we net out, I would say the LIPA liability, which is about 447, we have approximately 430 in resources to do that from all these different buckets. Which is, we don't have to borrow for this, and that's the key component of the story here is that I believe we have the resources to pay down the debt or the obligations to the taxpayer without using borrowed funds. And while I say 447 is the number, it's, you know, it's a calculated number when you negotiate these settlements. I don't know if it's going to be 447, 407. It could vary a little bit just based on what the property valuations are. But I do believe we have the resources at our disposal right now between the DAFs that we have created and then the obligations in the special revenue fund, which we created here with this body, which was, I think that we've cured that, along with the other stuff from the reserves that we put money into, kind of cured some of the liability issues that were, I briefly read the NIFA report, I didn't get into it, but to satisfy some of their concerns, I think we've put reserves away in places that I think will mitigate risk for the future. And clearly, litigation liability is one of the biggest things the county is subjected to that's anomalies. Some counties still borrow for it, which is kind of, I would say, if it was a different spot, it's not a bad thing to do, because if you have to tax the tax base to pay I could use the Shoreham as one of those classic examples of what happened there. That was the town of Brookhaven had issued, debt to pay that back. So, but I would say that we have ample resources to cover what the CERT liability is right now. And let's face it, the CERT liability is not going to go away annually. We're going to have CERTs. The question is and what we estimated, it could be anywhere between, I would say, between 75 and 100, depending upon the years. Once the role becomes more defendable, it will probably make the pathway to the future a little bit easier and lower the 75, which is where I think we got to get to. That in itself will produce, we do have resources now. We have 40 in DAF and we have 30 in operating. So we do have money to pay future obligations for the years going forward. It's built into the plan. It's going to be built into whatever we do in the future. And hopefully, the glide slope for tax certs is something that this body will not have to listen to, which has brought us to where the control period has been driven out of. So I can sit here and say that this is the best fiscal shape this county could possibly be in. And I'm just going to summarize what I said, and I am very brief today. Frank's going to kill me. I just want to summarize. Bond upgrades, key component for this entire organization. I give credits to the county executive for going with me. We did a good roadshow, and I think the analysts were impressed with what some of the things were said. We have two things. We're financially set for the future, and I think our economic base is very strong to sustain any downturns, because we are a very wealthy and affluent county. So even on the economic downturns, we still seem to survive a little bit better than most. But there are needy taxpayers out there, and we have to be cognizant of that too. I've covered the reserves. The continuity of my team is still here. We're still doing the same thing that we did in the past. I've been ordered, or not ordered, I shouldn't say that. I've been mandated to keep the budget structurally balanced. So that is an order that was given to me day one, that this and going forward, that I have to keep the budget balanced. So the county executive has given me that edict. I will follow it, as I've always followed it, because it's my job. I hate to say this, and nobody wants to hear this, but we should finish with surpluses, not deficits. So we have to be very careful. That's part of what that number is. Right now it's in the high numbers, but we should probably finish somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million annually, just to be cushioned so that we know. So similar to what New York City has, because they've been through this already, and not that I want to compare us to them by no stretch of the imagination, but part of the thing they do is they have to finish with a surplus every year, and I think that's something to eliminate some of our friends in another organization, NIFA. That's probably one of the things that we have to just manage to, and we can be free and clear of that. So, and our cash position, for lack of a better thing, is we have lots of cash on hand right now from all these different funding sources. I caution that we don't use cash in budgeting world, so I don't want to mix the two up, because it's going to create a fund balance, and a whole accounting thing. But we're not, one thing I will say is we're not doing any short-term borrowings, which is a good thing. We don't need to borrow for bands and TANs anymore, because our cash position is so strong. So I will open it up to questions. I will answer anything that you may have for me.
Thanks to you and your team, Andy, for the presentation. Appreciate it. As you know, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 4 times in 5 months. They went from near 0 to 2.25 to 2.5. How do you see this impacting us, the county?
It's going to impact my borrowing, because we're going to have to rethink how we do things. I mean, this is a different spot than I would say from years past. When rates were so low, it was you didn't want to spend your cash because you were almost giving, you know what I mean? You didn't want to do that. We're in a different spot now. We have to evaluate what the things are. And, look, the bond traders and everybody else will tell you, don't use short-term money for long-term things. And that's one thing we have to be cognizant of, and I would say, because, I don't know if there's a liquidity crunch coming or anything else, but right now I think some of the things I would like to do is keep some of this money on the sidelines for the future. You know what I mean? Some of the ARPA funds, because everybody forgets, we did lose $270 million of revenues during the COVID crisis. The CARES funding was there. We used it. I can tell you that. But I think some of the ARPA funds, we need to be strategically placed on how we use those monies. And I will tell you, Legislator DeRigi Whitten, what I was sitting here, we will come to this body. I mean, we have in the past with any changes. I can't move money, unfortunately. In a grant, I can't move $1 from point A to point B without the legislature. We will come with any new programs because we have to appropriate the funds through that. And if I want to move money around, the way we structured that ARPA fund is that we have to go to you guys in order to shift it around a little bit. So.
But when you say that, are you referring to, for example, the HAP and the money for the veterans and all those things that we approved?
You've approved those, but the HAP program, the guidance was changed by us, not by us, but it was changed by the Treasury. They were the ones who told us we couldn't do it. So we had to stop the program. Otherwise, we would be in violation of what the federal statute was. So we had to stop it. So that's why we did it. But if I wanted to respend whatever's left out there, I'm coming to you to say this is the program the county executive has.
When you say you're coming to us, is that at the direction of the county executive, or is that statutory or some rule from the Fed that you have to come to the?
No, it's not a federal rule. I don't think. I'm operating under the charter rules, which I don't know if I know that if I have a supplemental appropriation, I have to come to you.
Just for any supplemental?
Any supplemental. And if I want to move money, because the way the ARPA fund is set up, it's specific by program, which is what the previous controller made us do, to say that this program, because they have to do filings. And what the filings say is it's dedicated by a CFDA number. Is that, am I using that? Yeah. So if we want to change it, we have to, we've made I would say, an agreement that we would go back and forth with appropriations. If I change it from this program, which has a CFDA number of 1 to CFDA number 2, I have to move that money and it will require legislative action. So,
okay.
All right.
So that federal money would fall under the same rules as any other appropriation?
I would look at it as if we got grant money for a water quality, like we do a lot of stuff with the health department. We get a lot of money in from the state every year annually. We have to come to this body to move the money around. I mean, I'm just used to, I'm used to it. So
the excess sales tax fund. What's the balance in that special revenue fund right now?
I don't know off the top of my head because we're paying a lot of. The CERT problem is a lot more complex to operate it to get the money out the door. Irina, how much money have we gotten up the door? So we've processed approximately $75 million of CERT money for this year.
When you say you processed it, what does that mean?
It means we made payments or adjustments to the roll, depending upon what the actual balance was. But I think we've actually processed $75 million of cash out the door.
So 75 in tax CERT refunds?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason,
2022?
Yes, in 2022, yes. And the reason being, legislator, as we all know, the interest component of these certs is one of the components that grows it. So
how much did we pay back in 2021? How much did we refund?
I think my recollection was it was a small number off the top of my head. I want to say it was probably $30 to $40 million, but I have to go back.
For the entire year?
I have to go back and look.
How much does the administration plan on paying the rest of 2022 in tax CERT refunds?
We're going to try and get as much out the door. I would say let me put it to you this way, I'm going to give you a range because I can't pick a target, but between 125 and 175, somewhere in that range.
And what is the current liability? What do we...
447. That's the one that's on the paper as of, the number I have is what's in the annual report that we're working off of. But in reality, that liability could be lower, because I think we're very conservative in our estimates for some of the liabilities based when we do the modeling for the CERT liability. So, and we have $400 million of resources between the Special Revenue Fund, DAF, and some operating money out there to cover that 447. So,
thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Presiding Officer.
You just covered the tax CERT liability, the liability for tax CERT refunds. I just want to touch on the other two things specifically cited by NIFA in their report as a concerns going forward. Non-cert litigation. What do we have? We have reserves. We have operating that we budget for.
This one's a little different because these are, we do evaluation, the county attorney's office comes up with what we call non-cert liabilities. And they're probably on the high side, but we have monies, we have 30 million in operating, and we have approximately 100 and some odd million in this other reserve that we created, because when we amended the legislation for the special revenue fund, one of the components that I worked with you guys on was just opening up a little bit more of a wide window for us to pay things out. So we have ample coverage, but that liability, a lot of it's tort claims. It could be on the high side. I don't like talking about it because some people will hear that we have all this money and they will come in and say the judgment, I'm worried about judgments and everything else. So I get a little skittish about it for many reasons, but I do think we have ample coverage. And at the end of this year, if we finish with another surplus, I mean, if it's 100 million, I will figure out where I'm going to address it and where, because I don't know what the future holds. If I had that crystal ball, I would tell you. But I will put it strategically where I think, and this body, we agree to with the county executive, where that money belongs. So.
In terms of the tort liability, do you, as the budget man, believe that perhaps the attorneys and the county attorneys are doing what every attorney ever always does when they have a case, which is inflate the possible amount of exposure? So when it comes in
I
less
would
than that,
say
they look
I
at
would
it?
say no, because I meet with them I was meeting with them pretty regularly, beating them down like, what's this case worth, and you know what I mean. And it's not because there's a component of which I'm the non-lawyer of this, which I go, how could that be? You guys are crazy. You can't pay that much money out. And then somebody bangs a gavel and it's like that money appears. But I don't think there's an inflated number. I think it's a realistic number. But I also think there's, you entice the parties to settle when you give money up front. So I think, you could lower the liability by paying forward some money. So
But we have resources, I think, which is your main point.
we do have the resources, and I work very closely with them on managing like what we can afford and not afford. And we did this. I mean, one of the things we did do when we didn't have money was do structured settlements. Prevented us from borrowing. We went to the plaintiffs and said, would you mind taking $1 million over 5, or I'm just using it out there. So we did that, and I think we're going to continue that pattern because it just makes life a little easier for us in budget land and leave a little bit of money for the unforeseen things, because now we have reserves. So
The other thing they mentioned is workers' comp claims. I mean, obviously it's an ongoing issue. Will always be an ongoing issue. And anything in particular that
no.
Is spiking those claims? Or
No, I mean,
exposure?
look, one of the things we did do, which we've been a little remiss, is we used to do those WAMOs. You know what I mean? We got that. Remember that Section 18? That's when we buy out certain claims. A few years ago, we came here. Remember, we had a $15 million cash influx that somebody wanted to give to us. It's been sitting around. COVID hit. We kind of got sidetracked. But I think if we buy down some of those claims, I think, me personally, it's an actuarial valuation, but if they didn't count the fact that in the multi-year plan I have $35 million of operating funds to cover those go-forward liabilities. And it's a little different than, it's an insurance reserve, which is a little different than most other reserves. So I think we have coverage in there, you know what I mean? There's a lot of factors with comp. The state, in its wisdom, has raised the indemnity rates over the years, so it's created that liability up, but I think we have coverage there, and I would say this, as much as well-funded as the state pension plan is, the OPEB liability at the state is, I don't know, 100 billion, I don't even know the number. We're at 8, you know what I mean? So we don't have funding for the OPEB liability, so to that point, I would argue that we still have, we have pay-go ways to paying those obligations, so.
Just one open-ended question to conclude. Was there anything in the Comptroller's presentation that you felt the administration has a different viewpoint of? It can be not necessarily an out-and-out disagreement, but maybe a matter of nuances or anything like that.
Not material enough. I mean, we all have different ways of calculating and forecasting numbers. We have a different methodology than they do, but not on a lot of things. I think when it comes to, heads and fringe benefits, we kind of know where we're going to land. The debt service is a pretty factual thing. And I kind of don't like showing a lot of debt service savings right now because I don't know. You know what I mean? I wait until the end of the year before I will show that because just in case I do have to do an immediate borrowing or something, I have that money at my disposal. But, I mean, I work coordinated efforts. Unfortunately, I have 4 agents. I would say I have to work with OLBR. I have the controller, and I also have to still answer the NIFA. I'm the one who's got to be on the phone with them. But we all, I wouldn't say, you know, NIFA and we come to a conclusion, but I think with all the other agencies, we talk and we try and figure out where we have some differences. But, you know, we can argue over, you know, I don't think we're all far off. I read Maurice's report. I read the controller's report. I think we're all in the ballpark. We don't do GAAP. We do budget. And that's the one difference that we manage to. She's got to worry about GAAP. I don't. At some point, and I agree with her because we've, with Controller Phillips's, the county should get onto a GAAP basis for results because then we don't have this question mark. And to the question, I know there was a question about the NIFA gap, if I could just clarify that, the way I understand it. The NIFA gap, without the subjective part of it, which is the 1% rule, which is they assume risk, what goes against this is, which is kind of one of the things, because I have a past life in a township where I had fund balance, and I used it sometimes in an appropriation. That gets used against us as a funding source, as does borrowing, which the borrowing piece I get for borrowing for operating, but the fund balance piece just is, if you have it, it's there to be used because it's resources, but it goes against what the statute says, so.
I lied, I actually have one more question.
Okay.
You may have mentioned this, but we know what the projection is in terms of the surplus from the controller. She spoke about it, and in the OLBR in their report projects a surplus. Are you projecting a year-end surplus for the county? And if so, can you give us an estimate?
Right now, if you look at my report, it's a little convoluted how we're reporting it, but it's almost $80 million is what I would say, of which I've said I'm not going to keep it all. I left $20 million at the bottom line just in case there's adjustments to GAAP and everything else. That's the way I'm looking at it. But then I took 50 and said, we're going to figure out what we're going to do with it. And if it grows exponentially, any additional resources we have, we will, at the end of the year, in April of next year, we'll come and say we're going to put X number of dollars into this reserve, into that reserve, to mitigate risk that's looking forward. So,
okay. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Legislator Coppell.
Thank you, Chairman. Andy.
Good afternoon.
Just a couple of things. Just following on what you just told the presiding officer, if I need to understand, your understanding of the NIFA issue is that if we've got substantial reserves and we use any of it,
let's not mix fund balance, reserve, fund balance. There's two buckets because reserves are
different. But the fund balance is there to cover shortfalls.
It should.
If you use it for that shortfall, they ding
penalize
you for
me.
it.
Yes.
All right.
It's not to my point, and this is just, and I understand the statute and everything else, but to my point is though, if you look at most townships, what they'll do in their budget, they'll take out when they think, if they have X, because fund balance theoretically is taxpayer money. That's really what it is.
Of course.
So for you not to use it like as a budget plug instead of raising taxes for argument's sake,
unfair.
It makes no sense, and it's a resource we used against us. In fairness, I understand the concept, what they were trying to do, but now we're structurally balanced where our revenues and expenses kind of meet up. And if we're short a little bit, let's say $5 or $10 million, and I need to dip into fund balance on a $3.5 billion budget, I don't think it should be
invisible.
It shouldn't be I don't think it should be a penalty against me. You know, but I'm in a different position. I was broke 4 years ago, and now I got money, so it's
Right.
lottery.
So let me ask you something, and I think everyone seems to be singing from the same book here. We all think that perhaps NIFA is abusing its authority by continuing a control period. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I want to be careful because I have to work with them, but
All
I
right,
will
so
say
let me
I work with the staff.
back.
But I would say from sitting here, my answer would be yes, based on the behavior or where the fiscal position of the county now and what the rating agencies have told us, I believe that we should be in an oversight period right now.
So I'd like to ask if the administration has ever considered, and you'd know about the prior administration as well, is there any legal recourse? Looking at the statute, looking at the facts on the ground here, is there, if NYFA actually goes ahead and continues to refuse to end the control period, does the county have any legal recourse to step in and say, hey, this has to stop at some point?
I'm going to play I'm not a lawyer here, legislator.
Understood. I'm asking
But
if
I
you
would
know.
think that.
I know. You're not a lawyer, but what I'm asking is, has anyone looked into this question?
I believe we're exploring what the actual statute says and what our options are.
Right. So that's all. I want to make the point that if we're not looking into it, perhaps we ought to.
I would say we are looking into it.
Okay. Now, on the certs, so again, if I understood you correctly, liquidated and unliquidated, you feel like we've got enough coverage over there that we should no longer have to borrow. That's great.
I firmly believe that, considering what we've done and what we've put away.
All right. The point that I made earlier about the sales tax, and you alluded to that at the outset of your remarks as well. That is, as I say, that's something that I guess you're going to watch because of the timing issue. In other words, our expenses will go up later. It lags the inflation, and the sales tax receipts come in higher because of inflation to some extent. So there's an imbalance over there.
Yes, I would say that's correct, and I will say this. While unpopular at some points in the previous years, the conservative approach to sales tax over the previous few years has now reaped benefits, I think, because now we have the ability and the flexibility of upside to where the number was so low, which was a painful process. But I think if you look forward, I don't see, you'll hear the Wall Street people talk about the W and the V, you know what I mean? We've never seen the W in sales tax that I can remember. We had a downturn that we have that thing. In 2020, we lost 8% sales tax revenue, which is significant. It was 7.2. So is that going to happen? Are we going to go up and then down again? It's possible. I can't tell you that, but I don't think, even if we do head to the recession world and where the stock market goes, I'm too old to be playing in those arenas, but I will say that I do believe that even if this is a recession, I think the Fed reloads its gun in a different manner where they'll start lowering rates again at some point, which will, you know what I mean? Because I think once inflation is stemmed, you're going to have a problem with too high of interest rates, which is the cost of borrowing, which is going to create the unemployment factor, which is going to create a whole list of other issues that are going to happen. So they're going to go through the period of, bringing it almost to a snail's pace because that's just an economic, cycle. And then what you're going to have is that they're going to start loosening up, and then you start seeing a recovery because with every recession, there's a recovery. So, there's a down and an up. This county, where I think it is right now, positioned with the reserves that we have, we can absorb, I think, a duration of a recession, I think, for a short period of time. I wouldn't say long term, but for a short period, we're in good fiscal footing.
Let's just hope that the economy cooperates in there.
Well.
Last thing, and again, this is something to which you alluded at the outset of your remarks, and that is the ARPA. The prior federal program that was put to good use, and a lot of that money, you use that to permissibly use to pay certain salaries because of the shortfall.
That was CARES funding. Let's not
the CARES money. I
yep.
said
Yes,
the
we
initial
did.
slug of federal money.
Yep.
Right, and you use that to do salaries, and you thereby avoided shortfalls in borrowing and so forth, and that was great. Now we've got the ARPA money. This is close to $400 million. It goes away after that. It goes away. So this is an enormous county resource right now. There are permissible uses and impermissible uses, but isn't it true that the county every year spends a lot of money, whether out of current funds or borrowed funds, for uses that are permitted under ARPA.
Yes.
Right. Therefore, it follows that if we would use ARPA money for these particular purposes, that would free up A, current county money, and B, avoid future borrowing. That's true, right?
We should strategically place some of this money I would say we have to give some money back to what programs that this body and the county exec has to do. But there is a component, I would say, that, wherever the economy lands or anything else, I personally, because I am the money guy, we have to keep a little something in the back pocket of some of those funds just as additional resources.
And how would you go about doing that?
Well, I wouldn't appropriate it is what I wouldn't do. The one component, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, the one component that we do have to act on is revenue loss. We lost $270 million. We lost $270 million in revenue during the COVID crisis. We did. That's a fact. We do have the ability to take, one of the available uses is to take revenue loss of $270 million. I'm not suggesting that, and nor does this budget or future budgets include it, but I am cautious that we keep some money back in our pocket just in case we need it. So.
And the way we would do that is to, as I say, offset some current expenses as well as future borrowings?
It would be a complicated, I don't want to get into the transaction, but there's a way of doing it where we'd have to put it into the operating funds or something like that. So that's, you know what I
I
mean?
hope that we'll all be watching to make sure that as I say, that's used wisely and not dissipated in short-term expenditures that don't provide a long-term benefit.
I will say this, the administration does have some plans for future ARPA funds. They will be coming to this body with additional programs. Some of the programs were successful, excluding the HAP. I don't want to get into it. The small business grant program was very good. We're looking at that. We're looking to do a couple other things with some of non-for-profit agencies and stuff like that. I think we will be coming with a plan in September with some of the additional resources. With regards to, I'll get into opioids right now. Look, that was found money, and we are looking carefully on how to spend that. And I do believe that we will come up with to throw money out the door right away is, I get a little hesitant because the problem is when you throw it out there, the people who you give it to kind of want it again, and that's the problem we have. You know what I mean? And that's the historic. So we have to be very strategic on how we do that. There's a lot of components of opioids that I am not a drug and alcohol counselor, nor am I the person who can tell you how to mitigate it. But I think education, curtailing these illegal drugs coming in here, getting here, that's one of the other things. But the county exec does have a plan, I think, that he'll be unveiling at some point in the near future. So.
All right, we'll look forward to seeing that. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Just let me ask you, the federal money, that can or cannot be used for salaries?
It theoretically cannot be used directly for salaries, is what I will say. But there is a revenue loss component that we can claim, that we can use to offset any obligations we have as a result of that revenue loss.
The revenue loss, does the revenue loss have to be directly a result of COVID?
It was directly resulted. It's the fact that it is a direct result of COVID.
Well, let me tell you where I'm going with this. I believe some of the risk that NYFA identified was the pending challenge of the tax map verification fee and the red light camera fee. Because both are being litigated right now as whether they're constitutional, I believe. If they were to be found illegal, NYFA identified that as a risk. If that then becomes a drain and we can't make salary, can we use the money, because that would be lost revenue, could we use the money from the federal government to plug that hole?
Not. I would say yes, but it wouldn't be as direct as that. You know what I mean? We'd say that in 2020 we lost 270 some odd $1 million. Cumulatively.
Yeah.
We're going to take X number of dollars for resources because that was part of the
But
funding.
would you agree that risk is kind of off the table because we have that money right now that is not appropriated that could be used in the event that lawsuit gets?
The answer is yes, but in a
Good enough. Thank you.
Okay.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. President. What were you going to say?
Understood.
I do that in depositions.
No, and I'm trying to wear my legal hat sometimes, but the problem is that I don't want to answer it like it's a direct result because we can't directly correlate the loss in the litigation. And my opinion on some of these fee cases, which is just mine, is like the tax map verification fee is worth something.
Right.
Now, people will say it's only a $50 or $20. I quantify it this way. There's some filings that you make in Supreme Court that's $225. That's the way I look at it. Some of these things are transactional in nature where somebody actually, while you may see a button being pushed and a piece of paper being popped out for a tax map verification fee, there's a whole bunch of stuff behind there.
Well, Mr. Persick, you're talking to the wrong guy on this one.
I got it, but
I
I'm
don't
just
want to
telling
get into it because I know it's late in the day, but I disagree with that. I don't think it's worth $20. I don't think it's worth anything. But I'll pass it off to Legislator Drucker. Okay.
Never mind, I was going to say age before now.
Oh, I got you on that.
So, Andy, I know it sounds like a nuance, but can you explain the difference when this ARPA money is going to come through between appropriation and spending? The legislature votes on appropriation, correct?
You vote on any dollar that I want to spend, you have a vote on. That's the way I view it.
That's the way you view it.
That's the way, because
can
I
money-
pass a budget by control center, by object code, and I have to do it that way. Any supplemental appropriations, any money coming in order for me, the controller will not let me spend the money unless I have an appropriation to charge against. So
Okay,
I need.
so we have to vote on appropriation.
You do. That is correct.
But it can be pretty broad, correct? Like, it's not as specific as like as a spending item.
If you no, I would say yes and no, and it's mixing my answer here. If you give me a second here, if I have an appropriation, I have money or certain places where I can spend that money. It could be on salaries, it could be on equipment, it could be on contracts, it could be on widgets. I don't know, but I have to give you the legislation that says I'm spending $10 on salaries, $10 on widgets, $20 on equipment, $100 on contracts. I have to itemize each one. And what I was saying before was one of the things the previous controller made us do was put the obligations for these ARPA funds into specific programs that were CFDA. That's how they report on it. So I can't change that without doing it. You know what I mean? So I need to do that.
So back when in what was it, 21, when we had the funds, like where did that go into? What line?
Well, right now, any money we've decided to programmatically do anything with or spend, we've come to the legislature and said, this is the programs we want to do. The additional resources are sitting in a bank account somewhere in the treasurer's office. The cash is sitting somewhere.
What line is that? Do you know?
It's not in a budget line. It's
we don't know where that is.
It's in a, no. It's we know where it is. It's it hasn't been appropriated into a line item, so that's where it is. It's sitting in the control. We get money in all the time from the state and other agencies that sit in a bank, and then when we want to spend it, we come to you and say we're going to take money out of the bank and put it in there.
So again, right now, the legislature votes on any type of appropriation. I get that. There seems to be, and maybe I'm wrong, but there seems to be a gray area as to whether or not the county has to come to the legislature for the spending of the funds after we voted to appropriate the funds. Is that correct?
We can only spend it within the guidelines that the feds have given us.
Right, I get that.
So, and that's what the programs we've appropriated follow.
But does the county legislature have to vote on what you spend the money that we already voted to appropriate?
No, you don't, because
All
then
right,
you.
so that's why we need this,
No.
Mike,
I'm
using a Ferretti. That's all I needed to hear.
Let me circle back then. So I'll interpret it from my world, which is not. So
okay.
if you want me to spend, if I give you the general fund budget with salaries in it, you don't say not this how I can spend that money.
That's different. We're talking about
No,
very
but I'm just
specific
saying, no,
money.
but that's what you're saying to me is I have to come to you to spend it.
No, I'm talking about the ARPA money. That's why I'm submitting legislation today.
Okay.
That not only does it have to come to us for the appropriation, but also for the spending. Look, if it's already done, terrific. If it's not, maybe another future county executive or anyone else, I think this will cover us with a complete peace of mind that it's going to be coming to us. Again, it's checks and balances with a ton of money that just came in the door, and it's no offense to anybody. It's just that this is how I feel it should be done. So I'm going to stop harping on that.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask about the HAP. So this was decided back on May 15th, and there's over $70 million left on that line. Where is that money?
That money is not, we spent 26, 27?
Right. So 70, about 70 million. We had 100 million allocated, right?
70 million. We had 70 million.
No.
100,
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
100.
70. I apologize, legislative.
That's
Math is
okay.
better than mine, which I apologize
I don't know.
for.
It's all I think about. I don't know what you're thinking. This is all I think about. Okay, so what, where is that money?
That money is sitting in an appropriation right now that cannot be spent. The balance is sitting there in a program that is
For 3
not
months.
spendable at this
Okay.
point. The HAP program has been discontinued because the guidance
Right.
has came out,
That's
and we
okay.
decided
Okay.
to do that, so.
But that 70 million is sitting.
Sitting somewhere.
Do you know how long, do you have any idea how long that's going to be sitting there for?
It'll be, we have to obligate it by 2024?
So do you have any ideas for
Well,
where that's
well, I will
going?
say stay tuned, because some of the new programs that we may do is we will come to you and say, of the $70 million that we have out there in HAP, maybe we want to give X number of dollars to a different program out there. That's the way I would view it. We're going to
All
take
right,
some
well,
of the existing.
I hope that that's the case, because, again, that was already allocated, that was already
Yeah.
appropriated, that was already everything, and now it's still sitting there. So all right, so do you anticipate us being briefed on what?
I would say within the near future, I would say the September arena is probably where we'll be coming with a new
All right.
plan for some of the spending. You know, we may not do it in big chunks, we may do it strategically, but I think we'll be coming to you with some additional things that we want to do in the
Okay,
near future.
well,
so.
and again, I know what you were saying about the opioid funding, and you don't like to rush into spending it, but again, these are desperately needed programs, I believe, that
I don't disagree
especially
with
with the opioid crisis.
And I can tell you probably everybody in this room
I
has
have
been impacted.
one last subject I want to hit real quick. Bonding. Have you seen much, have you gone out for bonds very often lately?
We just did a deal in, I think it was June. Rates were all over the place. We were going to do the history of it was we were going to do it on X day, but that was the day of a Fed meeting. We ended up pulling the deal off the table, saved probably by pulling the deal we ended up saving it. But the rates out there, a coupon I think there was no premium on this deal, which is, I can't get into the complexity of this, but the coupon is around 5%, where in the old days it was probably around 2,
Okay.
2.5. So
I know, I'm
there is an
gonna-
uptick in rates, so.
Okay. The bottom, I got a list from the treasurer's office as to various bond authorizations that are just, again, already done, sitting there. And like for public safety, there's $174 million bond authorization that's there. And they want us to give them another $15 million, because, like, do you see them using the 174 that's there?
You got, one of the problems that we encounter when you do, sometimes you don't spend the full appropriation, these outstanding appropriations.
That's a lot, though.
It's a lot, but they're dedicated for specific resources, which when you go to the market has different BPU life.
Right,
So
I know.
some of the things that we have out there, I don't know the answer to the specific question about the 174, but we do have dedicated reasons as to why. Now, this 174 may be for, I'm going to use, to build the police academy or to build something else that's outstanding.
No, it's still here.
But whatever, I don't know the answer to, there are a lot of outstanding projects that are going on that I will say, we have the authorization, and we just haven't spent it, so.
Can you look
It's part of the
into
capital
this?
budget, yes, I will.
Because I'm telling you, I mean, if they're saying we need ambulances, or they're saying that the correction officers need cars, or whatever it is, $174 million sitting there in authorization, this has not gone out to bond. So it's not for ongoing project. We really don't start a project without having the bond. A lot of times, like you mentioned, for the police academy and things like that, that's not going to happen. You know, so this is not, we've not gone out to bond for $174 million just specifically for public safety. And that's money that we authorized.
I have to look into that
All
because
right,
I don't
and
know
can you
that
also
number.
look
I
into,
can't.
There's something called infrastructure, I'm sorry, and it's $479 million. So is that DPW? Is there already $479 million that this body authorized?
Let me go back and look at that. It might
Okay.
be environmental
The
bond.
date of this is April 30th, 2022. There's a lot of, there's also tax authorization, bond authorization, and judgment
so-
and settlement of $31 million.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
There's a line for property tax refund
Yes.
and judgment for $31 million. And again, that's bond
That's certs.
authorization.
That's
So-
certs.
And they're coming to us for more bonding, like maybe Monday.
Let me go back to the 479 million, which is where I think one of the big things is, part of that is the Bay Park conveyance that we had to
Oh,
authorize.
sure, but
You know what I mean? That's where a
would like
majority
you
of
to
that's
look
from.
at these bond authorizations already, because I don't know how this affects our NIFA rating. I have no idea. But if we give you the okay to bond, that I can't imagine that helping.
Well, it helps in different ways because there's a process in place. We need the bond ordinance.
Our
Look,
debt could increase by this much money if it's not even have to come to us. So
No.
I would like to just see what a summary is of all of these, and if you need a copy of this, I can.
Sure,
it's written on, but I can give it
I'll
to you.
contact Michelle and get it. But let me just explain what we do with bond authorizations, just so like why we can advance money within the calendar year. That's why we need the authorization, because we're very project-specific when we do our bond authorizations, meaning that if we wanted to buy the computer, we say that. So that's why there's probably a lot of outstanding unspent money out there that we've gotten too restrictive. But one of the reasons is we advance money is I have to be the one to tell what we can borrow because I have to pay the debt service out of the operating budget. So if they obligate $500 million, I can't afford that.
I understand, but
So
it's old.
we can't go above. Look, one thing we're very sensitive is, especially in my office and the debt managers, we make sure we have enough money in debt service no matter what we do, because if we don't, that will be a knock against us. So,
get it.
so the authorizations, even though they seem high, when you do a borrowing, it's typically you do the borrowing for the entire project and you borrow in tranches. So that's
No,
the
I
way
get
to
that.
do it.
I know that. I've been
so-
around a long enough
So you
to
know what I'm
that.
saying, so.
But the thing is, look, do we really need more? Like, if we have this much outstanding bond authorization, and you have 10 years to spend it, I don't know how old some of this is. I mean, we could use a lot of this old, rather than coming to us to bond again and again and again, why don't we use some of, I mean, I would just like to have before I would want to, and obviously I do support a lot of these things, but why do we have to authorize another 15 million if there's 174 million there? So if you could just let us know, and honestly, I hate to do this, but, you know, I think we're going to be asked to bond on Monday, or give the authorization to bond on
It's a
Monday.
more complex answer when it comes to debt and everything
I
else.
get it, I
You know
know.
what, a number of 174, what you're telling me, may have a lot of strings attached to it.
But that's what I'd like to know before
So,
they want to give us
well,
we want to give another 15 million.
We'll get you the
or
answers
another
prior to
100
Monday.
and
That's what
whatever
I can
they
get.
want, 160
100
million.
We'll give you an answer as to what is outstanding and the
All
reason
right.
that it's outstanding, okay?
Alrighty.
So,
Again, the only thing I'm going to leave with is I'd like to file that piece of legislation today. And if anybody wants to join, I'd appreciate it, because Andy, you did a great job getting us through, you got us through COVID. I remember you getting beaten up a few times, and you were stellar in your responses. And I feel like I want to be as careful as we can be right now, because we're in a good position. As this administration inherited a very financially sound budget, and you were a big part of it. And I give Laura Curran a big kudos also, and that was a major goal of that administration. And I'm proud of the fact that we're in the position we're in now, but I want to keep it there. So
thank you for the kind words, and I will say from the top upstairs who I work for, the same edict is stay on the path of keeping this place fiscally sound. So that's my job, and that's what I've been told
You have
to
the
do.
goal,
So
but
you
you
have
also
to.
need the tools.
Yep,
And I
so-
think that this piece of legislation would be a good
Okay.
tool, and I think a lot of the things that we've done in the past, you can wish it, but we need to really do it the right way.
As I was told once, hope is not a strategy.
Mr. Persick, do you recall the federal money that was used for the restaurant assistance program?
There was,
Bruce money?
yeah, there was ARPA money, and there was a
Okay.
CDBG money that
You
came out
you
of that.
recall
Yeah,
that?
yes.
did this body approve the appropriation for that?
Yes.
Okay. Did this body approve every time money was released to a specific restaurant?
No.
So when you said before that the legislature does not approve the spending, was that a good example of us not approving the spending? The fact that every time you released money to a different restaurant, Applebee's, Fridays, you didn't come to us and say, legislature, can we release this money to Fridays?
I would say yes.
Yes, right?
Yes.
So really, what we're talking about is a request to micromanage after money is appropriated, who the assistance goes to. So theoretically, if assistance was, money was appropriated for assistance, for example, the HAP program, and I haven't seen her legislation yet, so I won't comment on the legislation, but it sounds like we would have to approve every single $375 check that was spent, right?
I don't want to, I'll be honest with you, I'd rather have the county attorney's office look at the
Fair enough.
legislation.
But my
And-
point
but,
is-
but to your point is, I would be a little bit more scared, like, that I would have to come to you with what I would call that you don't understand. There's a lot of operations here to get money out the door. There's a warrant of AP checks that go out. If I'm going to have to then get approval for that,
I do understand.
So
I guess my
that's what-
point is, every dollar that's appropriated to a specific cause with this ARPA is signed off on by this body, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's only because an advisory council was put into place by the current administration. There is no more advisory council.
Okay.
So, look, I totally agree with you. We did it right, and I want to just keep doing it right. But
Okay.
there's nothing that says that that's the way it has to be done. We did it. Remember, we had that whole discussion about how we're going to vote on, that was like
Which we
an
have.
open, right, and I really think it's worked well. I mean, but there's nothing that says that it has to continue that way, all right? And
I
that's
disagree,
what I
but
want.
let me get my points out. My second point is my question is regard to the bonding. Is bonding project specific?
Not always, but most times here we do some borrowing.
Okay. How about the money that we were just talking about?
I don't have the list in front of me, but I do know that when you authorize a project for a bond ordinance, you usually do it in its totality, because that's just so you know, local finance law kind of describes how we have to do that. They say that what the total project cost is, you have to authorize, if it's going to cost you $100 million to do a project,
Right.
the borrower wants to know what they're
Of
borrowing
course.
for.
Can
So-
we use the money, that $170 million, for the money that may be requested to be borrowed for Monday? Yes or no?
I can't reallocate it. I have to look at it, but before I see the information, I can't reappropriate authorized bond. I have to do additional ordinances. I have to rescind traditionally what happens is when you have leftover bond ordinances, when your project is complete, you rescind any outstanding authorizations, because it kind of goes against the markets look at what your outstanding borrowing ordinance are. So the short answer is, I don't think you can reallocate it. I have to look at the list. I don't know off the top of my head, but I don't think we can.
You don't think so?
No.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure that.
All right, Legislator Drucker.
I thought you forgot about me. Thanks.
Not this time.
No, I'm kind of worn down here. I don't have a lot.
Plan
I
worked.
think, with regard to what my colleague, Legislator DeReggie Whitten, I think, John, some of her concern, I remember reading a couple of months ago in the papers that the county executive, when he was asked about the surplus money from HAP, said that the administration wasn't going to fund that program anymore for whatever the reasons, not enough participation, or whatever the reasons were, and that the administration was looking into other appropriate areas to direct the money. So I think maybe the concern was, well, he's going to take it on himself, or the administration is going to take it on themselves to use that money for what they think is fit without coming to us. But that's maybe what the concern was, because I remember reading that the administration was considering various other ways to spend the money. Anyway, that's not my question, Andy. Thank you, though. You've been great. I need a little quick education, so hopefully you won't take more. My eyes glaze over, as I said, with some of this stuff, but with regard to the gap and the fund balances, I need to know what the difference is, or there's non-spendable and there's spendable, right? What is in the spendable is restricted versus committed versus assigned. Can you tell me about that?
I would prefer if the controller could, because
Yeah, I
there's,
probably should have asked it, but I forgot.
well, okay, so all those categories, I'll do it, if I may use the term, I'm going
You
to
can
dumb it
give me
down
a-
for you if you can.
Yeah.
Restricted, spendable, this, the other, they're all restricted for purposes that are already defined, meaning that we've said we're going to restrict spending for this, we have restricted money, restricted fund balances. If you look in the police district fund, it's restricted fund balance because it can only be used in that thing. The only thing that has discretionary portion of it is what we call unassigned fund balances of the four categories, okay? Because it's spendable, unspendable, restricted, and unassigned. The way I remember it when I wore my controller's hat in Huntington. So all the other three categories, and I would defer to the controller on this one, is they're kind of, I can't really spend them unless they're dedicated for a specific resource. The unassigned, it would sit in a bank. If I wanted to spend it for this body, I would have to come to you and say, please appropriate X number of dollars out of unassigned fund balance to pay for X.
Okay.
So
the
I hope that helped. I mean,
yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
It's enough. It's enough for me. That with regard to, we're talking about the HAP program, the money that's left over in the HAP. So, according to what you said earlier, that $70 million, whatever it is, it's sitting in the controller's office right now?
The $70 million is sitting, the cash itself is sitting in the treasurer's office.
In the treasurer's office.
Remember, we have and I guess maybe I didn't convey this. How this place works, the county works is, we do a budget, which gives you the appropriation to spend it. Then it has to go through the controller's office for approval, back to the treasurer's office to release the check. So
Okay.
the controller theoretically is the oversight of the money. And I don't know if that was conveyed or not, but that's one of the processes. The treasurer has to wait for the controller to approve the payment, and then he issues the payment.
But I guess my question then is, the $70 million is not in any particular fund right now?
No, it's sitting in a cash account, and it's not, it's dedicated to the ARPA fund. At the end of the year, we have to do a lot of cleanups and everything else. There's a lot of accounting stuff that we have to do, but we have to replace the funds at the end of the year.
I just have one more question. The tax cert liabilities, the litigation fund, how much, do you know, if you know, how much has been spent from the litigation fund to pay for tax cert refunds of the $208 million that was set aside for this purpose? Do you know?
We have, there's a little disconnect here because I will say there's some budgeting things, but we anticipate approximately $75 million, I think, as of the end of this month will be paid, and we're hoping to get out the door by the end of the year, approximately 125 to 175 million.
On top of the 75?
No, inclusive of the 75. So we're going to get out in total this year, max approximately 175. It's a processing issue too. It's, you know what I mean, and it's we have money to roll forward in future years to pay down the additional debt.
So you think by the end of '22 that will be rolled out?
Yeah, we'll have rollover carry forward money from the residual money left in the special revenue fund for certs that we'll use for next year, along with DAF and the operating funds. But we're going to try and get as much out the door that's accruing interest so that the liability is lowered. So.
Okay. I'm done. I'm done with this witness.
All right. Thank you. Does any other legislator have any questions? I'm going to open it up to any public comment, if there's any at this time, just to wrap up. Doesn't appear to be any. So we're going to close it out. I want to thank you, Mr. Persick, and I think just in closing in this hearing, I think what we can all agree on, I think what budget agrees on, the controller agrees on, even NYFA, based on their report, agrees on, is that we certainly should not be under a control period any longer. I think we're unanimous in that, I hope. So hopefully that something comes of that very soon. Again, thank you all.
Thank
and
you,
have a good night.
legislators. Thank you.